All right, guys, we're live. So this is the first call-in show we've done in a little bit. I've really enjoyed the last couple. Uh, so we're gonna do a couple, I guess, items of business first, which is kind of the first few things is just housekeeping stuff, right? Uh, so as you guys have noticed, obviously the new look has been rolled out. Some more of that will be coming. Kato, who I talked to last night, is an animator, so he'll be doing some stuff for the channel. By the way, if anyone listening to this, if I was in conversation with you on Twitter and DMs, the reason I haven't been back to you is that I have caught a suspension, and not just a regular suspension. They have locked my account. Uh, for kind of a stupid reason. I actually wasn't even saying anything particularly controversial. I just implied that Tom Clancy, right, the 80s action writer, was a federal employee. And I used a term that is both a common term for someone who is a spy and an archaic term denigrating African Americans. I honestly didn't mean to do that. I was just, speaking off the cuff. But my account is completely locked. Hopefully that'll get cleared up soon. But if I haven't got back to you, that's generally why. I also, before we get into it, should announce that I've launched a Odyssey channel. So that's a full backup to my YouTube channel. Everything that is on this channel is also on Odyssey. I really recommend Odyssey. Out of all the alt tech platforms, Odyssey is the best. It's honestly better than YouTube. I use it, like anyone who also posts to Odyssey, I watch their videos there. You can watch it on mobile. You don't have to pay for anything. You can watch it. You don't have to have the video playing. You can just have your phone off in your pocket and listen to it like a podcast. So I'd recommend you guys go over there because I feel like my days are numbered on YouTube. In addition to that, we also have Entropy up. So if you want to check that out, you can also watch my streams on Entropy. And if you want to send, questions or comments or super chats, it's faster and cheaper to do so on Entropy. That said, I'm going to read out some super chats from previous streams because I know that I've missed some. All right. So Prince of Parma sent a couple, and this is on my stream with Conscious Caracal on the 17th. But he said, on that note, here's 75 cents for good luck. Again, thank you very much, Prince of Parma. And then for a very generous 140 Rand, said, the English private schools in the Eastern Cape are like stepping into another world. One high school I saw had a detailed wooden plaque showing over 100 of their graduates who'd become casualties in World War I. So that's interesting. Obviously, when I was speaking with Conscious Caracal, and I think that was quite a good episode. You guys let me know what you think about it. We talked about the difference between the Boer and the Anglo population. And he said specifically that the Anglos have centered their resistance to the government there through their schools. That's what they kind of have rallied around, and they kind of have a copy of the English public school system. Obviously, the meaning has changed in different cultures. So that's interesting. I'm not surprised in that. I know there was something similar in Kenya, kind of like anywhere in the British Empire. And then we had two more from my stream with Thomas, which is one, Machiavelli Sucks to Go said, you guys are super based. Thank you very much. I agree. And then this is Lou Templar, Cringe Walker. For those who haven't heard my stream with Thomas, I mentioned as a kind of a relevant anecdote the Purge movies, which are kind of like shitty low rent horror movies. But the concept again, which will be necessary to understand the super chat, is that the government has allows all crime for 1 day a year. Again, it's a stupid concept, but it makes for a funny movie. Everyone commits murder in the Purge. No one ever commits tax fraud, forced relations, or slavery. How curious. I actually completely agree. Again, stupid movie, but a little bit amusing. So anyway, that's all the supers handled. I'll bring on, all right, Scratchy, you're on.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back on. For those who want to join, by the way, there is a Telegram link that'll bring you to my public Telegram. And in that Telegram, there's just a join link. And so, once you're in, you just hit that link and I'll bring you on first come, first serve. So if you want to talk to me, now's your chance. But anyway, how are you doing, man?
Well, I'm kind of living the unofficial bachelor life because the wife is literally on the other side of the planet visiting the in-laws for a couple months.
Have you met her parents?
I have. They were there at the wedding. That's one of the reasons why we kind of rushed the wedding. So we basically planned our wedding in about a month. So we kind of just did a courthouse wedding and then went to a restaurant afterwards, and that was my wedding. Like that was pretty much it. And it was all because her like getting a visa is kind of a pain in the ass, and her parents were going to be He was asking,
Oh,
hey, can we push it up because they'll be here? So can we just go ahead and kind of rush the wedding so that they can be there? And I said, yeah, sure. Like, sounds reasonable to me.
yeah, that's fair enough. Actually, I can see it. We had kind of the opposite situation where we will have been engaged for over a year, which is kind of on the longer side of normal. And again, it was one of those things where it was, kind of when it had to be. But in a
I guess
weird
it's a.
way,
Go
oh,
ahead. I'm
sorry.
sorry. No.
It,
You weren't
it's
finished.
actually quite, it is odd being engaged for so long. I wouldn't quite recommend it because you get stuck in this kind of like weird in between place.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of like neither here nor there. I'll put it that way. And on one hand, it's nice. Like we were able to very slowly, move into the apartment we're going to be living in, so there's no rush for anything. But at the same time, I think everyone, ourselves included, are like, all right, can we just get this over with? This has been too long.
Yeah, I'm always the type of person that looks at positives and negatives. Like for instance, for the positive of being engaged to someone for so long is that you get some exposure of what they look like when you're actually going to be married, because women let the veil kind of slip a little bit during the engagement, and some women are just fucking nasty, right? And you can also find this out during the wedding planning stage because the whole bridezilla thing. So you do get a little bit of that exposure, and that can kind of warn you, like, is this actually worth it? But on the other hand, you're right. You're sitting there and you're like, okay, we're not quite there yet, which means, a bad day and you could get up and leave, and I've put all this effort in for nothing. Like, what the fuck is up with this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, in the private Telegram group, we had a conversation, kind of raging all day about marriage. Obviously there's been a broader discussion on YouTube about, marriage and masculinity. And I'm not really interested in, excuse me, had to mute myself for a minute. I'm not really interested in like, sniping at, AA or his takes because that's a little bit like fake and gay.
I was gonna
Uh,
say let's not name drop anyone.
oh, well, it's AA. I don't care. Like, again, like I'm comfortable saying I disagree with him, but nonetheless, I don't want to just turn this into a reaction. But I'm curious, right? Like you had several things to say about kind of like the nature of men and women and the nature of leadership. And I'm wondering if you could kind of, I guess, like distill that for the people at home.
All right, so I've got an interesting perspective on it, and I know that because, just to give a little bit of history about myself, my parents were like 90s and 2000s Republicans, with my mom being kind of that boss girl, and that's part of the reasons why their marriage fell apart, right? Like my mom was never the submissive type, always wanted to be the dominant person in the relationship. And so I've seen what that looks like. And then after they divorced, I primarily lived with my mom until I was about 16 years old. So then I was also, raised by a single mom for about 6 years while going to a private school that had less than 100 kids in it. So I got all kinds of weird exposure. And then later on, I joined the military, as everyone knows. And more importantly, I was also the nerdy geek that moved around a lot, right? Like I think I went to like 5 or 6 different schools between middle school and high school. So never really got close to making friends. And then being the nerdy guy was difficult for me to make friends. So the perspective that I have is that I remember how difficult it was for me to date. And I remember that I was indoctrinated essentially with the feminist gynocentrism, as some people like to put it, right? And I remember being what's the word I'm looking for? Inundated with that while I was in the dating market. And what I eventually kind of had to learn was how to overcome that part. But what's weird is that I didn't do it 100% intentionally. As in, I never had the thought until I was already married, hey, I've been indoctrinated with feminist garbage and I need to uproot it. So when it comes to marriage, I didn't learn until about 2 years in what an actual man is supposed to be like in a relationship. And that was all because we were basically having fights all the time. And it always boiled down to, she wants you to lead the relationship, but she never wants to tell you that she wants you to be in charge, right? At least that's my experience. She wants you to basically take charge and be the guy that she can count on, but never ever mention it unless she's really fucking pissed. Like my wife has definitely dropped that on me a few times, like twice, I think. So first off, there's that. And then when it comes to the leadership part, I actually learned this in the military and then applied it to my marriage later on, right? I was enlisted and the highest rank I ever got was E6, which means that I was never in charge of tons of people. I was in charge of a handful of guys. I think at the most I was ever in charge of like 12 or 13 guys. And one of the things I learned from that in a close-knit group, you know, power and how to wield sovereignty, they don't 100% work on such a small scale when you directly work with these people. Like I didn't have minions to go, you know, fuck these guys up or go scream at them if they didn't do their jobs. Like it had to be me, which means you can't, there's certain ways that you have to go around it because it's, you know, it's not actually like this, but if you were to think about being a barbarian tribe, you know, if you shit all over the guy and scream at him, then he might stab you in your sleep. You know, I mean, obviously we're not going to deal with that in the modern times, but like this guy works with you. This guy sleeps like a couple rows down from you. You know, you really don't want to piss this guy off. So there's a dance that you have to do when it comes to leadership that I also apply in my marriage. And it's, go ahead. It sounds like you're going to ask something.
No, so it's interesting to me, right? Because there are some things that in our circles are kind of considered like old hat. Like we've covered that ground. And one of those seems to be kind of like the nature of power, right? So there's this line from Schmidt, right? That sovereign is he who decides the exception. And the idea in that is that essentially, you know, it doesn't matter if the president is allegedly, you know, the one in charge of the country, if the Supreme Court is the one who can tell him no or tell him yes. That means the Supreme Court really has power. For reference, you can see my stream last night with Cato on that in Brazil. But these same people who understand that principle in politics view an interpersonal relationship as like essentially like a pure a relationship of like pure domination.
They
right?
look
Where
at it through
they
look at it through the Schmittian lens, like which it isn't, because politics is supposed to be the realm of the state. But we're not talking about statecraft. We're talking about how you deal with people. You know what I mean?
Well, right. And again, there's also something to be said for the fact that like when you're dealing inside a family, like it essentially like communism is essentially how a family works, you know? Like I hate to say it, but like legitimately you don't run the same economic calculus you do in a relationship that you would, you know, with your coworkers or with your, you know, or like with a political party, right? There are just certain things that need to happen one way or another. And like, okay, yeah, sure, maybe something is technically someone's responsibility, but like things just need to happen, you know? But there is this like weird level of posturing that it seems like you see.
No, the point that you made about domination is actually perfect. That is literally the exact word that people seem to think. Now, I don't want to try to make it sound like I'm some crazy hippie, because in all human relationships, there is always hierarchy. It always exists. But the issue is that how much power one has to exert to maintain their role in the hierarchy is directly proportional to how many layers in the hierarchy are beneath them. If you're only dealing with the people directly below you, which in the case of a family, you know, the patriarch would be doing, he's not going to send, you know, fucking soldiers to kick down their door and shove a gun in their face to say, hey, you need to clean your room. Like that level of power and control is not what's warranted in this situation, because as I mentioned earlier, like these people sleep like in the same house as you. And in the case of your spouse, she sleeps in the same bed as you. In the case of your spouse, additionally, your spouse cooks your fucking food. So do you want to be that guy that you read about in the news? It's like, hey, he pissed off his wife and she poisoned his food. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, there's also something to be said for the fact that like you don't really want a completely useless woman. You know,
Yes.
in the
Yes.
sense that like obviously you don't want this kind of like 90s feminist boss bitch, you know, who's completely independent. But at the same time, it's like like someone who's genuinely incompetent and can't do anything without you there, like that's a liability.
Yeah,
You know,
like
and I realize that there's always a little bit of there is a difference. You know, that there is this like and I don't know, this is difficult to say directly, but there is this kind of like, generally, if you're in a functioning relationship, you are the one in charge to a certain degree, right? But if you are the person who has to make every decision, you've essentially made like a rod for your own back. Now you have to decide everything. And that's just like, that's a nightmare. Like there are things I genuinely don't want to be bothered with. Like you solve that problem. That's not
Yeah,
that's not in my wheelhouse.
This actually ties back to, again, my previous discussion on leadership in the military, right? Like if your subordinates are completely unable to function without you, like you can't be there all the time. That means that you're a single point failure, and single point failures mean inevitably it will fail, and it will probably be catastrophic. All right. So like it's the exact same principle when you're dealing with a family. Like you do not want your woman to, like, let's say you're like, in my case, right? Like I work a pretty intense job and it's sporadic, as in sometimes it will give me grief and I'll just be at work for 3 or 4 hours. And do I really want a woman that's going to be calling me like every 30 minutes or every 45 minutes because she's like, I don't know what to eat. What should I cook? Like, what was your plan for today? Hey, should I let the dogs out? Like, how much food should I give them? Like that sounds like a nightmare. I don't know what man would want a relationship like that. The ideal household, truth be told, is one that kind of runs on autopilot even when you're not there. As in, obviously that's never going to happen. And I do want to be in input, but when you're in a leadership position, the ideal situation is that all of your subordinates or the people beneath you, they're so well trained or they're so well mannered that they can function just fine without you. It's only in the most extreme situations when they call for your input or call for your help.
Well, and there's definitely something to be said for, I think that there's a problem with a lot of men, and it's not to say that like I'm some like Lothario that has like women figured out to a T. Far from it. But there's this problem where it's like guys exclusively view women on their own terms, and they're like, well, I would never react that way. It's like, yes, of course you wouldn't, because you're a man, and there's definitely something to be said for the fact that it's like you just have to accept a different like frame of logic. You have to accept a different like set of priorities. And like once you've done that, it becomes not necessarily easy, but at least like explicable, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And another thing is you don't want your partner to be like you, because then you're married to a dude. And do you want to marry a dude? No. Like you want the woman for the feminine touch, for the way that only she thinks about things, for the seduction factor, right? Because I don't sure as fuck think about that things. I think A plus B equals C, right? Like I don't think about all of the minutia that goes in all of that crap. Like I don't care, right? Like, and on top of that, like one guy in boot camp actually said this best. If it wasn't for the shame factor and the fact that I'd never get laid, most guys would probably be perfectly fine living in a shed and working at Burger King and playing WoW all day. Like, like this is like, it's just to show. I'm only bringing this up because the fact that men have a tendency to get frustrated with women or complain about the way that the woman thinks, I think it's a sign that they haven't accepted that like this is what life has handed you. And you don't want a man anyway. Like you want a woman. That's what you're craving. So why do you want her to have the attributes of a man? It makes no sense.
No, definitely. And you see the same thing with politics, right? Where it's like guys expect women to think about, to have their politics, to think exactly what they think, as like an autistic man on the internet. And one, that woman, if that woman exists, there's one of them and you don't want to meet them. And two, there's also something to be said for the fact that like over the course of a relationship, someone will they will grow to meet you, that there's much more there's like an adaptation, where you kind of become like each other, definitely, but it's much more so, it's kind of like 60-40, woman v man, if you get my point.
No, there was actually a stream. I don't remember where I saw it, but it was a long time ago. It was like several years ago, where somebody brought up the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? And they were talking about, I think his name is Endeku, who was the guy who was supposed to kill Gilgamesh because, Gilgamesh committed prima noctis, right? And they couldn't convince Endeku to enter the city to actually kill him. What they had to do is they had to send a woman to him, and the woman like offered sex to him instantly. But then she said, I'm not going to sleep with you again until you come kill Gilgamesh. And that fucking got him right then and there. So the point of that story is supposed to be that women, in a sense, tame men. Okay. Like that's what you get out of, that's like the part of you that changes when you enter a relationship with a woman, is that you become more civilized, right? Like you're not as willing to just beat someone over the head and take shit away from them, right? And what the woman does is the woman kind of just, well, she just learns how to become nurturing. She's like, hey, I've captured this beast, basically. I have to take care of him, right? And then she takes care of your children as well. Like that's where the nurturing aspect and the nurturing instinct comes in, right?
Well, and that's the deep wisdom. And again, I love the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's kind of a fun read. And if you're looking for something to get into as an approachable classic, the Epic of Gilgamesh is quite easy to read in the sense that it's like very simple declarative sentences, but there's still a lot of meaning in it. But it's the same like set of wisdom that you see in like Beauty and the Beast, right? It's the same archetype. Now, admittedly, the lesson of Epic of Gilgamesh is essentially bros before hoes. What's his name? It's not Echidnu. It's something like that. And Gilgamesh become best friends. And then Ishtar, the eternal queen of thoughts, essentially, breaks up this kind of like ultimate, friendship. But that's neither here nor there. I completely agree with your point. And again, it's this, I feel like it's an overreaction that's kind of understandable, right? That you've described this kind of like, this like very false feminist narrative, and there's also this like that comes along with it. There is this kind of like feminization of men, that you should be essentially like a woman, the kind of like traditional male bonding of, kind of like making fun of each other or being like physically aggressive. Well, we have to get rid of that. You should instead bond like women bond. So there is definitely something in that.
I never personally experienced that. But that's also because I'm kind of an older millennial. I was born in the early 90s. What I experienced was how to treat women in the dating market. And I specifically remember hearing it from my mom. And to all of the young guys out there, what women say and what women want are not the same thing. Women say they want the super nice guy who, buys them whatever, who says yes, dear, and yes. That's not what they want. They want you to say no. And I don't think they do it intentionally. I'm pretty sure it's a subconscious thing. But women want you to be tough, and women want you to tell them no sometimes. And here's the thing: like I'll give an anecdote about it, right? Like one day, what was I? I was thinking I was throwing away a diaper bag, right? Like my wife saves grocery bags and throws all the baby diapers in them, and then she set that bag next to the main trash can, and I noticed that the trash bag is pretty full, so I just put the baby diapers in there and tie up the bag. And she goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What the fuck are you doing?" And I said, I'm taking out the trash. What do you mean? And she says, well, I don't want you wasting space in the garbage bag by putting the baby diapers in them. I said, what in the hell are you talking about? She says, you see, if you put the baby diapers are already in a bag, but if you put that inside the trash bag, that's additional space in the trash bag that you're wasting. And we could put more garbage in that and save money on trash bags. And I said to her, there's some discussions and arguments that are worth having. And this is not one of them. And I took the bag out and just fucking left it as is. I tied up the bag with the baby diapers in it and walked out. And that was the end of the conversation. And what I'm here to tell you right now is that sometimes you have to do that. Now, sometimes she's going to put her foot down and say, no, this is important to me. And that's when you need to take it into consideration. But other times she just wants you to tell her no. Because here's the thing. You live with her and you're comfortable with her, which means it shouldn't be hard for you to tell her no. And if it is hard for you to tell her no, then that means it's hard for you to say no to somebody else or when something important comes up. And that's what she's worried about. And as I said, I don't think they do it intentionally. I think it's purely subconscious.
Yeah. And again, my point in this, because I've talked about a lot of this before, is not to beat a dead horse, but it is very much like that. To be honest, like a lot of the guys in this sphere are kind of like dead end losers. And that's not like an eternal position in life. That's something you can get out of. That's something you should get out of.
I was one. I'll admit it.
Oh yeah, same. Like I was, and maybe I was super fat. I no prospects. Like it's something you can get out of. But to be honest, if you don't have someone telling you how to get out of it, you're doomed. You have no chance, right? Because the narrative, the loudest like I guess like the loudest like I guess plan offered to you is garbage. It's to be the nice guy, it's to like do whatever, women want. And that's a terrible idea. You can't do that. That will leave everyone involved in it miserable. And so like again, like I'm not trying to just like beat a dead horse here, but obviously there are people who need to hear this,
There is one piece of advice that I don't remember who I heard it from. I probably heard it from a liberal. I have no idea, but it's solid, right? And it is, look at yourself in the mirror, either butt naked or in your underwear, and think to yourself, are you happy with that? And if the answer is yes, then you should be able to find a woman, no problem. But if the answer is no, then why would anyone else be happy? Like, if you're not even happy with yourself, why would anyone else? You know what I mean? Like, the point of a relationship is to enhance your life. Like, you meet a woman because you want her to be the salt on your meat. Not innuendo, not intended. Point is, you want her to enhance your life. You don't want to be dependent on her, right? So like that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, don't sit there and think, oh, a girlfriend will make me happy. No, if you're not happy right now, a girlfriend isn't going to do anything for you. In fact, she might make your life worse. So
I completely agree with that. And there is definitely something about in a particularly healthy relationship, like you can be, it can kind of motivate you to fix things about yourself, right? Like, oh, like if we're, this is serious, like I want to be a better, like husband, whatever. I should do this. I need to fix this about myself. That I'm not denying that.
That happens more when you become a parent.
Well, fair enough then, right? But also, there is this, and this is something that the PUAs say that's actually kind of correct, right? Which is that this idea of like one-itis, this one girl who will come in like this manic pixie dream girl and like completely, remake your whole life, right? Like the Scott Pilgrim versus the world, type of story.
It's a dream. It's a fantasy.
It's not only a dream, but it's kind of a fundamentally like feminine way of viewing relationships, that it very much is the male version of that like Beauty and the Beast story. And like fair enough, right? Like Scott Pilgrim is kind of a funny movie, but like it's not how real life works. And if you operate off of that, you're kind of like dooming yourself to disappointment.
I'm actually going to drop a red pill for men right here. Don't tell your wife or girlfriend this, because like, just don't. Men typically operate in the world of reality and men operate in emotions, right? Let her keep her fantasy. So don't talk about this, right? If your number one reason for marrying a woman is love, you are wrong. Love should definitely be in the top 5, maybe even in the top 3, but it should never be number 1. Number 1 should always be your values match, or she makes you want to be a better person, but it should never be love, because that love could be confused for that lustful attraction that you have for her, right? Like, especially when you're in the honeymoon phase in the early relationship, that can happen. And
I completely agree. And this is really one of the prime, I guess, like one of the prime myths of, the boomer generation is this idea of love at first sight. This idea that kind of like feeling of infatuation is something that can kind of like carry you through a relationship. And if that ever fades, well, then it's time to hit the eject button, and like, look, like I'm not currently married. I've been dating, my fiance for 6 years now. So, right, like quite a long time, but nonetheless, like if you tracked through that, like how often have I felt truly in love with this person? Like, don't get me wrong. Like that's something that's definitely has its place and it, it happens, but certainly not all the time. And there are definitely times where I'm like, fuck this sucks. Like I just want out. And obviously like there's such things as relationships that are unsalvageable. But if you allow that kind of like momentary emotion or that kind of like, I guess like momentary reaction to guide you through a relationship, you're doomed, because there's no feeling you can sustain for 30 years. Like no matter how perfect you are for each other, if you accept that kind of like gay phrase, right? There's just no way to do it. And so like you kind of have to, at least in my mind, and again, I have less experience than you do, but like a relationship is hard work and it's a responsibility, and you have to treat it like that. Because if you approach it passively or approach it as just like something that has no downsides, you're just going to get demolished. There's no way around that.
Sometimes you just have to be stubborn and say, I'm not giving up. And that's the only time it's worth it to do that, is if there's no major negatives to a relationship. Like there's always negatives to a relationship in one way or another, right? But if the positives outweigh the negatives, like what you're going for is that the positives massively outweigh the negatives. But generally speaking, if the positives outweigh the negatives, then there's no real reason to just drop the relationship the first time you have turbulence, right? Unless it's a pretty big fucking deal. Like you find out she's a liar, or she got pregnant with your kid and aborted it or something because she was worried about, oh, what if he leaves me or whatever, right? But I could spit out hot takes on that forever.
Well, and Scratchy, I'm gonna have to move on to the next guest in a little bit. But I will say this is actually my point, what I said on the stream with Distributist and Prude the other day about why there are some women who are too attractive to date, which is that if you have someone, and this isn't necessarily always true of attractive people or like people who are true, like 10 out of 10, like smoke shows, but it's often correlated, which if someone has a pattern built up in their life of essentially ejecting from a relationship the moment they encounter something they don't like, that's almost irreparable. And if you see that in someone, that's a huge red flag, because the chance that they will do that to you is extremely high. And particularly like if, a woman is very attractive, has a large social media following, has a lot of like male attention, that's an opportunity for her to do that. You still there, Scratchy?
Ah, damn it. Sorry, I set up I literally had on my phone, Jonathan Frakes tells you you're right for 42 seconds, and I was going to play it for like 5 seconds.
Well, you know what? You can play it now, and I'll pretend like it was the first time, and I'll laugh.
No, it's Bluetooth to my damn headphones. I forgot to turn it off. I've already killed the punch. And before that, just to really show my hand, I was actually looking for Dave Rubin, like a compilation of Dave Rubin saying, I agree with that, just to really stick the knife in and twist it. Because I know people say that you're the Dave Rubin of the dissident right.
I'm just too agreeable again. But thank you so much for coming on, Scratchy. And again, like I always enjoy talking with you. And if there weren't, like 4 people behind you, I'd be happy to talk to you all evening.
Work to do anyway, because I'm a bitch that does work, right? At least that's what some people say. All right, you have a good one.
All right, talk to you later, man. All right, before we invite our next guest, I'm going to read an entropy chat from Bolero393. Love the channel. Congrats on the Twitter ban. You don't get banned for being, quote, hateful against people that genuinely loathe working class white people and everything good, true, and beautiful. To quote Robert De Niro to the young Ray Liotta in Goodfellas, you took your first pinch like a man. I assume that was you took your first punch like a man, but in either case, I appreciate the compliment. And again, like I think I'm not mad that I got the ban. I'm mad that I got it for a stupid reason. Of all the things I've said on the internet, the fact that that Tom Clancy was in the pay of the federal government is fairly milquetoast, right? All right, American Populist, how you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, man? It's fine evening.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. It's been a while since we've talked. Congratulations, by the way. For those who don't know, American Populist channel is really worth your time. And his episode with Thomas, his first one on the civil rights regime, which is a pretty good one. Pretty good. It's probably it's probably my favorite thing I've seen you do with Thomas. That just hit 4K views, which is pretty big.
No, that was one of my favorites as well. I really enjoyed that. Thomas really gets it with his own there. And he already gets in with the JQ question. So he's already into it within the first like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thomas, I've decided I'm going to do more like numbered series, so kind of like a series of podcasts on the same topic. Like after Cringe Walker, Lou Templar and I did our, 2 on the 3-body problem. I'm doing one with Thomas. And I guess I've said this already in the Telegram, but for, the people, who aren't in the group, I'm doing a series with Thomas coming up actually on the history of liberalism. So that should be good. And again, your guys is, like I've said, it's well worth your time. You guys should check out AP's channel. But anyway, man, how have you been doing?
Doing pretty good. Just started college back up again and got a new job. So quite happy to have an income source again.
Yeah, tell me about it. I like I said, I got laid off from the factory and I'm in the process of getting hired at a financial firm, which is great, but it's just taking forever. And so, the advantage is obviously I've had plenty of time, to stream, but all the same, I'm starting to feel the pinch, I guess.
Yeah, financially it will catch up with you. But I was recently in Miami for a family vacation, and it really just kind of hit me the third worldization of the cities in America. It really just kind
Yeah.
of like sunk into me, like how with the language barrier, um,
Yeah, that's
Spanish
very
being
much
like
my
almost the first
experience in Florida
language.
too. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a rough go. I took a month long hiatus in like June of last year because I went to go, spend some time with my dad, out of the country. And because he's kind of an expat, half and half. But we flew out of Miami and it was a mess. Like no one spoke English at all. And so like trying to sort something out, it was really difficult. So I feel some kind of sympathy for you.
No, it is. It deeply hurts being a native Floridian and seeing your state be ruined by all these third world leeches, to use a derogatory term.
I guess I'm not going to blame you for that. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's an interesting state. I mean, to be honest, one of the and we'll have to be a little bit delicate about this, obviously, because I would like to have only one, major social media ban in a day, but Miami in particular tends to hold a lot of Brooklynites, right?
Yes, quite a lot of them. And you see their influence quite deeply in the city, especially in like the elite areas with like places where Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump would live.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking, did you live close to Miami when you were in the state, or were you kind of somewhere else?
No, I'm originally from Central Florida, Orlando
Okay.
area, but culturally, Miami is kind of similar to that, but just on steroids with the amount of South Americans just there.
Yeah, I mean, some of that's been true for a while. Like I know there's a huge. I mean, I guess that's very much like the plot of Scarface, right? Is that there is a huge, Cuban presence there. Uh, it's been interesting because I've kind of been going back through a lot of, Reagan, because again, he's kind of famous for, giving. Oh, what's the name? Giving. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. What's the term? Amnesty. Thank you. Sorry for that. For giving amnesty to to any Cubans who came over on boats. But that is definitely an interesting, I guess, like dynamic to it. Was it much more, I guess, like homogenous where you were?
Yes, I would say so because it was the very rich area, uh, which is pretty safe and a lot less diverse. But those people still do the work for these people.
Yeah, I guess that's true pretty much everywhere in the American South. So anyway, man, do you have any like major like interviews coming up? Because I know I guess we need to plan something because I haven't been on your show in a while. And the last one, I feel bad. As I tend to do, I double booked. And so I had agreed to meet someone at church and to be on your channel within like 30 minutes of each other. So we did like a speed episode where I was on your channel for like 25 minutes.
No, it's okay. I'm a Zoomer too, so I'm terrible with planning and schedules. And I've messed up a couple of interviews that way as well. So
See,
don't feel bad with yourself.
my problem is I'm too good at planning. I plan stuff all the time, just on top of each other.
No, but I have an interview with Prude coming up.
Oh, that'll be good.
I'm also doing one with the Bull Moose Project. They're
I
kind
don't know him.
of
Uh, Send me
they,
some of his stuff because I'm curious. I'll check him out.
yeah, a friend recommended for him to me. Have him on my channel. And I posted the interview I did with Wickinson, Witticism TV, on my channel today. So that was a pretty good show. And
Yeah,
we really
he's a
kind
good
of
guy.
dug into Donald Trump, kind of the low energy Donald, the state of like politics in America. He's a lot more black pill than I am, but he's a really good guy.
I will say, out of all the people who caught I'm surprised have not caught a Twitter ban. You should check out Witticism TV on Twitter because that man he pulls no punches. In addition to his video essays, which are great, it kind of sucks actually because video essays are really punished in the YouTube algorithm. And people like Witticism, who puts out a 10-minute video essay once a week, like he's got a really astonishing work ethic, and he's just not really rewarded for it. So you guys should go over and check his channel. I did an interview with him a while back, and obviously AP, he just did one just a few hours ago. So you should check him out because he does good work.
Also, like something I've recently noticed, going back to the language thing, because in Miami, a lot of parts of the South of the United States now, like you have to speak Spanish to communicate with like the people like doing menial jobs that Americans used to do. For some reason, I just noticed a lot of these like Spanish ads just like popping out of nowhere. Like it's not even like you're watching Spanish content; you just get ads in Spanish. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have. I noticed it because when my phone connected, to cell service, I was getting ads in Spanish on like Spotify and YouTube, you know. So essentially, like they obviously knew my location and were expecting that as someone in that area that I must be a Spanish speaker. So yeah, I definitely know exactly what you mean.
No, it feels like they're definitely pushing Spanish #1. Press 1 for English. Press 2 for Spanish. No, sorry. Press 1 for Spanish. Press 2 for English. Kind of narrative.
No, definitely. I completely agree. And it very much is. And you see it when you talk to, like older, quote unquote, like right wing boomers, right? That they're like, oh, well, it keeps things cheap. It makes labor cheap. So I can buy my Frosty for the same price as last year. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, you follow that line far enough and you get to Miami, and I'll put it that way. If you like Miami, you can move there, but I don't think most people will.
It's not like you'll be able to afford it anyway, because all of the Brooklynites are moving there. So it's not like you'll be able to afford the areas you want to live in anyway. But I feel like that happens with all nice states, that like red states that are governed like not insanely like blue states are. You see this blue exodus, right? And what happens is these people see that red states are great, the economy is great, they're booming. There isn't the social chaos that comes with these one-party states, shall we say. And they start moving their masses, and they just like ruin the culture, and they start changing the politics of the state. It's not like they're all bad, but they do change a state. People moving there in large numbers changes the culture of people of the state irreversibly. It doesn't matter if they're on your side or not.
No, that's
I feel like
definitely
that's
true.
a cultural cost we really don't talk about a lot.
So one thing really quick, Minoan just posted a link in chat to AP and witticism. They're streamed together. So you guys should just go open that in in another window, and and so you can watch it after, of course, after, because you have to stay for the many guests we have to come. Turbo Donk actually brings up an interesting interesting point. We traded everything for a cheap Frosty TM. Was it worth it? Well, I'll have you know, a large portion of the population sitting there with their their fat 401ks and their gated communities in Florida. Well, they think yes, of course it was worth it. And the fact that you'll probably never buy a home in your life, you'll be working at a dead end job until 70. That's inconsequential because look, at least you can buy a Frosty.
All right, man. We still have the free market, right?
Yeah, of course, the free market. So we've got 4 guests behind you. So is there anything you want to bring up as we kind of bring your segment to a close here?
Oh, I would just say, please check out my channel and please subscribe because I desperately need subs. Please help me get to 1K because I have a lot of great content. I put a lot of work into the content to make it as best as I can for you guys. So if you guys could sub, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. And I will also say, you may notice some similarities between the look of his channel and mine, and that's because we got the same Brazilian graphic designer, Dora, to do both of our the look for both of our shows. So anyway, man, thank you so much for coming on, and you guys should all head over to his space. But I'm gonna have to say goodnight to you for tonight.
All right, good night, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, see you, man. All right, Cody Browning, how you doing, man?
It's great, and I can't believe one from Goodfellas.
Okay, Cody, I'm gonna have to kick you because that's the most cursed audio I've ever heard. All right, we'll see if we can give him some time to figure that out. All right, guys, I'm just typing out to Cody really quick. you guys have any questions, obviously I'm checking chat, but the best way is either, an entropy chat or, a super chat. So it goes straight to the top. Luthemplar, it was the beavers. All right, Cody.
All right, good. Can you hear me?
Oh, nope. All right. Anyway, while he gives that, I'm going to bring on, all right, Caractus Jack. How you doing, man?
Doing well, doing well.
Did I? Okay. So I'm pretty sure, you're also David Wayne, right?
Yeah, just one moment.
Oh, yeah. You can
Just
tell,
ju-
this is the most professional show on the internet, right? Is that neither me nor the guests
Yeah.
have their setup figured out.
Yeah, well, I was going to prep, but I didn't realize that my home place in the lineup, so I forgot to turn off some background noise.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Anyway, yeah, you can call me David for short, or Karatix Jack in the case, or Jack in this. Actually, that conflicts with your name, but
I'll just call you David because that's what I met you as. How are you doing,
Yeah.
man?
doing good, doing good. I basically had a lot of fun, kind of getting new and getting used to the idea of monologuing and whatnot. That's definitely been different, talking into the void.
Yeah, it's weird. It's that this first couple streams are very, very strange. You feel extremely self-conscious, and then you just learn to turn off your sense of shame and just speak literally anything that pops into your mind. And it may or may not work out. But anyway, man, so when did you start your channel? It's just a couple days ago, right?
Yeah, it was a couple days ago. I already wanted to at least use it essentially as a place where I could come up with rough draft ideas for essays and just basically riff off the notes. So then I could take that and then use it as a starting rough draft, and also, provide some level of public accountability. And then recently I got laid off, so I've had a lot more free time.
Hey, welcome to the club.
Yeah, but so I've had a lot more free time, and now I actually have a theme now with my idea for Milton stream. So I'm basically
Oh, that would be really good. I really enjoy Milton. Actually, in addition to Paradise Lost, I thought Area Pagetica was probably the best argument for kind of classical liberalism of anything I've read.
Yeah, and in many respects, like Milton is, and I'm going to be weaving it in more and more as I pull more and more interesting little biographical details and whatnot. Milton is kind of, in a very real sense, like the ultimate story of a black pilled dude going into white pilled mode, simply because he started out with a lot of promise, but at the same time, when he was in college, at university, he was well liked, but he didn't really like the curricula at the time, and he was very conscious of his talents. And at the same time, he didn't produce much in terms of poetry and whatnot. That was really great. It was high quality, but it wasn't like anything earth shattering. And so, he basically, a lot of his stuff is him kind of blackpilling and saying, well, I'm going to have to remain a virgin my entire life in order to fulfill my promise. And I haven't made anything yet, even though I know I should make something. Uh, and likewise, he was a political revolutionary in many respects, where he essentially helped overthrow the royalist order and replaced it with the republican order. And he saw that all shatter.
Yeah, that's interesting because so I was taught Milton by a feminist,
Ooh.
which kind of ruined. Okay, didn't he made his best attempt to ruin Milton and to ruin Paradise Lost. So he did this thing where he really like poisoned the well because he basically described Milton as this like overbearing, terrible father who is like blind and like horribly crippled. And instead of, letting his daughters like frolic through the field, he made them sit inside all day and write Paradise Lost for him. And despite that, I really enjoyed it because I'm kind of, and obviously I don't mean to like slander Milton, but there's a reading of Milton that was kind of popular in the Enlightenment. Oh, by the way, Minoan, he said he can't find your channel. What is it? How do you find your stuff? By the way.
Oh, if you you should be able to just enter in my name. You may be misspelling Karaticus as Karatakis with an extra C before the T. I'll actually let me see.
I'll link that if I can spell that. I can't spell normal English, so
Let me just pull up my channel.
awesome. I'll it's just become a shilling stream, hasn't it? I'll drop that in the.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, I got it fixed.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was saying that he became this kind of like popular reading of Milton's Satan as kind of this like Enlightenment revolutionary hero that obviously the author never intended, nonetheless.
Yeah, it was a William Blake's interpretation or take that he was of the party of the devil, even if he himself wasn't conscious of it. And I believe that was also the take of the interpretation ultimately of what's his name, Dr. Johnson as well. It didn't help that that Milton almost certainly was like a Socinian or adoptionist. I forget his exact non-Trinitarian heresy, but yeah.
So what's you said that word Socinian? What does that mean?
Socinianism, if I recall correctly, it was a very popular at the time non-Trinitarian heresy that I believe was basically like a Calvinist, like a 4-point Calvinist view of God with adoptionism. So Socinianism, let's see. Yep, non-Trinitarian Christian belief. We go down. Beliefs Christology did not exist until he's conceived as a human being, and that he was.
So that's actually interesting. I didn't know that context. So I think out of everyone in this chat, you're the only person who's actually met me IRL. I don't know if you guys remember, but a while back I did a like a little mini stream. It was like 3 minutes long, where I basically invited you guys all out to a basket weaving event. So do you want to talk about what it was like basket weaving and meeting some like-minded young men?
Oh yeah. To everyone that is concerned about doxing and whatnot, just meeting people and just in general, like honestly, it's the benefits outweigh the costs in my opinion, because developing actual friendships and local people that you can rely on in order to just talk to and know who you are talking to at the other end, it's really it really doesn't compare to just keeping things strictly digital and completely compartmentalized.
No, definitely. And you build a rapport very quickly with these people. I will say, just an amusing anecdote. I think that you and I, out of a group of 8 or 9 of us, I think we probably drank 75% of the alcohol consumed that evening. Just the 2 of us. And so I had a grand time. I'm not sure about everyone else. Not to say it was like a wild party or anything, but it was just kind of amusing.
Yeah, I think it's because both of us didn't really have to drive, or
That's 100% true.
Yeah, a bunch of people are either like driving to hotels or things like that, or in my case, I had to spend an hour on the metro, so I had plenty of time to.
I was about to say that's the
everything settle.
perfect way to sober up, right? You don't want to remember that anyway. But it was really fun, and I've been basket weaving twice. It's how I met. Obviously, that's how I met you. It's how I met Paul, and I really recommend it because it was good. There was a huge breadth in the people that were in that group. Like there was a full on tradcath. There was a possibly schizophrenic National Socialist. There were the 2 of us. It was really an interesting conversation.
Yeah, Politicrat as well. He's fun. Yeah.
Oh wait, Politicrat? No, Politicrat. What was he there?
Yeah, I believe he was.
Huh?
Unless I'm misremembering
I don't think
which
he was, because I had a conversation with him on my show, and maybe it did. I mean, to be fair, there were like 9 or 10 people there, so I very easily could have missed him.
But yeah, I'm hoping that we can make this much more regular, a much more regularized thing, because especially as we start to develop and grow and have established properties and whatnot, we won't have to rely off of off of meeting at restaurants and things like that. And eventually someone's going to strike on the golden geography of becoming a social hub.
No, I think you're definitely right. And I think that a lot of people are kind of, myself included, are eagerly waiting for the next US event. I know that they've been in talks trying to figure out, where that's going to be. Because, there was obviously a bunch of like good energy coming from the last one. And I think people are very excited to kind of bring this thing into real life.
Yeah. I've also thought about the idea of making an informal sort of regional event. Like I know the Northeast corridor is kind of like ideally suited for something where we just kind of like have a cross server event over something like, I don't know, like I could see something like all of us getting together and spending a weekend watching the Ring Cycle or something like that live, or I don't know.
Yeah, I see. There are several, and I've kind of, the problem is it's difficult to do over the internet. But I've kind of wanted to do a movie night, and there are several movies that I've wanted to do. Like I as you've may or may not know from watching the intro to my show, I love the Kenneth Branagh Henry V movie.
Oh,
All 4.5 hours of it, and I want to just sit down and force some like low attention span Zoomers to watch it with me.
It's so good. St. Crispin Day's speech is so good.
Yeah, that, and I also love his edition of Hamlet. That's my favorite film. I watch it generally once a year, but I've watched it so many times that none of my friends want to watch it with me again. They're sick of it.
It's such a gorgeous film. Oh my gosh!
Oh, yeah.
Like one of my bucket list items is to own a high quality 70mm print of that film.
That's a good goal. That scene probably, and this is the most famous shot in the movie, but that scene of his soliloquy is great. Where he's walking around, the Danish palace, like talking to himself in all these mirrors is great. It is not for the faint of heart. It is close to 5 hours long. Like it is a time investment. However, it is very, very good.
It is an event. It is an event preferably enjoyed with a nice range of pre-chilled beers, starting with light and ending with heavy.
Me and the boys are getting smashed with Kenneth Branagh.
But yeah, and you have, best part is you can split it up into like 3. It's long enough that I believe what was it, like 6 hours or something ridiculous like that?
It is genuinely a gargantuan film.
Yeah, you could split it up into 3 different parts where you have like different courses of meals mixed into it. Like you genuinely can make it into a like 2/3 of a day event where you enjoy.
You're really selling
good
me
food.
on this.
Like that's what I did when I had to watch Das Boot for the first time. I had to split it up into 3 different sessions in order to do it. Of course, I was less socially connected at the time, so I couldn't make it an actual event. But I would totally do that with Das Boot now if I had to rewatch it or wanted to rewatch it. But yeah, I forget, did Kenneth Branagh put a director's commentary on it? I used to be
I don't know if so. I've never watched it.
Yeah, I used to be a huge film nerd, so I would scour for director's commentaries because they're always so insightful. A very surprisingly good batting average for director's commentaries.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have strong feelings about Shakespeare adaptations. So I actually live not near, but I guess both of us do. Live relatively near the Stanton Shakespeare Theater, right?
Oh yeah.
And have you been to that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it's interesting to go there because on one hand, it's kind of incredibly cool. For people who don't know, there's a replica of Blackfriars Theater.
I definitely been there. If that's the, yep.
And so like I used to go, like my high school used to take trips there, and it's kind of like truly the state of all like American arts is that it's incredibly cool on one hand, and it is run by the biggest shitlibs in the world. Like I think they still have a vax mandate, which should tell you like how truly like libtarded they are.
Why?
Believe me, man, I don't know. Actually, like at first it was just a mask mandate, and so I went once or twice because it was like whatever, I'll wear a mask. Like to see like decent quality Shakespeare, it's worth it. But when they started like Papers, Please, I was like, all right, screw you guys. I don't need to do this. Kenneth is always there for me. He doesn't care.
Yeah, it's the best adaptation, and I'm kind of curious to hear this as well. What my favorite, absolute favorite, like performance of Shakespeare I've ever seen was in Crystal City, and it was an adaptation or a performance of Julius Caesar, and it was absolutely amazing. Like they went all out in terms of the display. They had a live orchestra, if I recall correctly, or it
Oh wow.
sounded powerful enough, and they just it really sold you on Caesar was the good guy, because at the very end they have him like come the ghost of Caesar come out and like in full regalia with red banners coming down with the grand brass playing and all that stuff. I'm like, man, this is just absolutely electrifying in terms of performance. But you're not wrong about this weird paradox with Shakespeare and the leftists. Like the amount of cope and seethe that feminists try to reinterpret Taming of the Shrew, which is the most misogynist film play I've ever seen, where it's literally the entire premise is Petruchio is gaslighting Cat in order to in order to make her submissive. It really boggles the mind.
Well, similarly in Macbeth, right? Like the unsex me scene, is played as like a boss bitch moment, and you're like, no, 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 you don't understand. She's a monster. Like everyone looks at her, and you're like, this is a terrible person, But there's this like edgy, kind of like feminist retelling. Incidentally, it kind of reminds me of. Have you listened to many of Jonathan Bowden's speeches?
I've listened to a fair number.
He has a really good one, and I can't remember. It's available on YouTube, the Jonathan Bowden archive. But he has one where he talks about the history of productions of Othello, right? And he talks about this kind of like transition from first Othello was a white man in shoe polish, then it was an African, and then it was kind of like transgressive to make it a white man in shoe polish again, because that's the whole point. And there is a lot of that in Shakespeare. And you kind of get this realization that many of the people who actually are paid to carry forth the torch of Western tradition absolutely hate the Western canon and absolutely hate Western civilization. And in a weird way, they try to make their whole lives about deconstructing it, and that's really the point. I'm curious, have you ever been to an event like at school or something where they had like I don't know what you'd call it, but like a recognition that we are standing on stolen land or something like that?
No, I've never gotten to that point, but I have been to performances where the cast spent the time afterwards. And it's so awful, because it was with one of my favorite plays, and what they were trying to do to it, it's so like I could kind of understand trying to do it to Taming of the Shrew, where they tried to like deconstruct it by talking with the audience, but they did it with Much Ado About Nothing. And it was this Cuban adaptation of it, where it's set in like 1930s Cuba, because it kind of works there. And they tried to deconstruct it about like how Sir Benedict was like afraid of a strong woman and all that stuff. And it's so subversive, because unlike in Taming of the Shrew, where it's hyper combative and kinetic and whatnot, in terms of the conflict between the sexes, it's way more like harmonious in Much Ado About Nothing, because fundamentally it's both the sexes kind of huddling together and just psyoping themselves into realizing how moronic they can be. Like
That's actually a good point. I kind of know the big name, Shakespeare plays pretty well, like not perfectly, but Taming of the Shrew is not one I know that well, but I should go back to it. That might make an interesting episode.
Oh yeah, and especially it's one of those really fun table plays where you just read it with friends, because it's, even if you're not a terribly well-read person in terms of Shakespearean strange vocabulary, like the dialogue punches through in terms of in terms of Cat and Petruchio, going at each other and trying to belittle each other and get one up on each other.
No, that's fair. Well, definitely, man. We should set something up, because I want to, both appear on your channel and I want you to appear on mine, because I've had some really interesting conversations with you, both in the Telegram and IRL. But is there anything you want to say as we kind of bring your segment to a close?
not much else other than I think that's a really good stopping point. I'll just plug my stuff. You can find me on Telegram on Chronicles of Karaticus Jack. My YouTube channel link was already put in the chat very helpfully, and on Twitter I am J Maximus Coriolanus.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, man. All right, Cody, did you fix your godforsaken mic?
Okay, how does it sound?
You sound good. Before you sounded like you were getting sucked into another dimension. Like I could hear myself, but it sounded like I was microwaving a speaker or something. But anyway, man, I'm glad
No,
to have you on.
the part of the apartment where I'm using my internet kind of stinks, so I thought like, oh, I'll just use like my iPhone to hook up to my computer, but I guess that just doesn't work for like a live stream.
Yeah, especially with StreamYard, it generally it takes entirely too much bandwidth, like way more than it should. But nonetheless, right, it's where we are.
Well, screw it. I was going to make fun of you for not knowing the Goodfellas line, but I guess we're past that.
Well, see, that's actually it's even worse than that because I've seen that movie not like super recently, but in like the last couple years, and I just like had completely I remember that scene, but I have absolutely no like remembrance of that line. I am as you as anyone who's heard me talk about a book or anything on stream can say, I have the worst memory for specific details in any work of fiction.
Which
But
is
anyway,
kind of funny because I'm actually like the opposite. Like in that same scene, Robert De Niro tells him like, "Remember, never rat on your friends and always keep your mouth shut," which is just saying the same thing twice because they're all idiot Guidos that shake down people for money.
no, I completely agree. There's a valuable lesson to be learned in the fact of just shutting up. Like both in the context of if you actually don't have anything to say, like there are issues that have come up where I'm like, I don't know, I've got no idea, so I won't bring it up. But also just like there are times, especially when like your friends are getting hit, by an out group, then this happens to Christians a lot. Don't dogpile them. Just shut up. Just shut up. And obviously, you don't necessarily want to become Italian mobsters, but they can teach you something, I guess.
There's always something to be learned from a well-organized group, from a powerful minority running things, as we know from elite power. But besides Italian mobsters and probably the best gangster film I've ever seen, I don't really have anything to talk about. Is there anything that you would like to talk about?
So there's one thing, which is you have an immense store of meme magic, Cody. You've been creating on Twitter these just edits of X-Files, right? Pro-white X-Files, and you've successfully gotten X-Files back into the zeitgeist. In addition to that, you're also largely responsible, at least in many ways, for the beaver meme catching on. Which, if you've been in any kind of like DR comment section, you've probably seen people beaver posting.
Yeah, man. I mean, I have a background in comedy, and I also have I think I mean, let's just face it, I've been a consumer for most of my life, and so I just remember all of these references and episodes, and I think I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist because I saw Jurassic Park. I wanted to be a marine biologist because I saw Jaws, and then I think I realized, like, wait, I just love Steven Spielberg movies, so I want to be a director.
Well, see, I similarly found my calling in life through a Steven Spielberg movie, but I won't tell you which one.
but but in terms of like the X-Files memes, I mean, to me, it's like it's a known quantity. It's something that I love to watch. I just thought, like, what's funnier than kind of like making them into characters for ourselves, where it's like, well, I guess 777 was right, Scully. The white man really does fucking love.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really got into the X-Files that much. I have a classic like Zoomer attention span, and so television in particular, like it has to be really good for me to get into television. And this is a real throwback. My grandparents loved the X-Files, and they had the full series on VHS tape, and they would slave a tiny little like 10-inch VCR, use VGA cables, and plug that into a more modern TV. So they'd have two screens running, one as like a built-in VHS player, and they'd watch the X-Files. So especially those first couple seasons, I don't like know them super well, but I've seen a lot of the episodes.
Yeah, I still own a 10-inch VCR TV that I bought at Goodwill because I just love to collect VHS tapes because it's I don't know. There's just something about like watching like the grainy film of it. There's something about like hearing like the original movie.
Cody, you're cutting out a little bit, but I think you're back now.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, man.
Oh yeah, I still own a VHS TV that I like to use sometimes. I collect VHS tapes. But yeah, like I think it all started with I kind of realized like, oh wow, like the X-Files really is the global
Oh, darn it, we dropped you again.
shit.
Sorry, man. I enjoyed talking to you. It's just that your internet is not cooperating at all. I'll give you a second to see if you can fix it, because I know network issues just suck. Richard Cook, X-Files, one of those programs everyone wants to talk about. I miss those days. Yeah, it's interesting. That and, well, for me at least, because my parents are kind of core Gen X, so born in 75, and my grandparents are core baby boomers. So they have kind of all of those, like they were big into X-Files, and also like the other show they watched a lot of was like 24. So like all of those like big like network phenomenons, I kind of absorbed as a kid, passively. All right, are you back, man?
I think so.
All right, yeah, you sound perfect now.
Okay, perfect. No, just with a lot of that stuff with kind of like what that commenter mentioned was that it used to be that we kind of did have like a unified culture. Like we used to have like everyone watched the same thing because you only had cable. And even though like it was like complete consumerism, and even though like it was like run by the same people, there's something kind of nostalgic about, oh, did you catch The Handmaid's Tale? Well, no, I don't have Hulu. Like, oh, did you catch Mindhunter on Netflix? Oh no, I have Prime and Hulu. I don't have Netflix. And now we're in kind of this weird space where even mass culture is not even for like the entire mass, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. It's like everyone's become extremely siloed. And in a weird way, we've essentially just remade the cable package, with all of these streaming services. But like, it's quite regular that someone will say like, oh, have you seen this show? And it's something I haven't even heard of. Like, I have just no idea. Like this White Lotus show that's kind of, seems to have become popular. I literally had never heard of that, until someone I know is like, oh, have you seen this? And I probably never will. But nonetheless, like there's just so much content being produced. It's absolutely insane. And again, it kind of ties into like what I think of like as the defining characteristic of Zoomers, right? And it's really the fact that like there's never been really a time in my life of a monoculture in any way. It's all been super siloed. And so like it is really hard because like not hard in the sense that like, but just in the sense that like people are like have almost no common frame of reference, past, I think the last one really may have been Game of Thrones, but I can't think of anything since then.
Yeah, I mean, like everything has like this like huge bounce. Like, I mean, I even have HBO, and I remember when whatever that Euphoria came out, and everyone at my office was talking about it. I just kind of refused to watch it because it looks awful, like degenerate and whatnot. But it is but even HBO back in the day, like you had to watch everything at the same time because it came on at a certain slot. You can just like rewind and replay everything. And yeah, I do kind of feel for Zoomer. I mean, I'm probably around Prude's age, so I'm like a young millennial, I guess you could say. So like we still kind of remember the old internet. We still kind of remember cable. We still like some of my memories from high school were like, hey, did like you all catch like the same Comedy Central stand-up special on Friday or Saturday night? And that's what we were all talking about on Monday.
and even movies to a degree. Like, what's like the last time where it's like the movie that everyone saw that wasn't like Marvel cape shit?
Well, even that, I mean, like, I don't, and maybe this is just like a function of like my friends in social class, but like I don't really know the people who are still watching all the Marvel movies. You know, like there was a time when they were that big, but like at this point, it's like I know someone must be watching them because they sell, but like if they do, I don't know that person. You know, like I don't
Well, yeah,
know the
because they're all
person next to them.
Chinese.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, I do know those Marvel people, and they are my friends, and it's kind of sad because I just want to show them, like, hey, there are good movies that like have existed within our lifetime, or there are good movies that I can show you from yesteryear. And they're just so obsessed with this, just kind of like make a new movie, plug product, make a new movie, plug product, kind of thing. Where, I mean, I was talking to this into a group chat with some other friends of mine about Funko Pops. And we were saying how even like action figures of yesteryear, they were at least like, I had like opposable thumbs, they were unique characters. Now it's literally just like we're just going to paint an IP onto this weird bobblehead looking thing, and you just make a wall of them. Like it's not even like unique collection, or it's not even like true to you. It's just like new IP came out, Funko Pop in my cart because I'm 35 years old and I don't have a family and I have a girlfriend that I've been seeing for 7 years and I don't want to propose to her.
Yeah. So, the Funko Pop is an interesting one because like it really is like the ultimate like Globo Homo product that they literally are all the same, just with like a different skin on them. And I'm kind of addicted to like Reddit cringe. Like if you've been on the internet long enough, that
Movie
there are like,
Bob.
yeah, I know, I can't stop. Is that there's something about the like true like consumer, like the Wojak consumer types that I just find kind of darkly fascinating. Like I just can't stop looking at them. And there's definitely a part of it that's like there, but for the grace of God, because a lot of guys who are interested in discussion and interested in ideas get kind of siloed into media analysis, instead of like talking about real ideas or about the world as it is or philosophy, they kind of get stuck into like 4-hour dissections of Dark Souls 2, which is like a weird surrogate activity because it gives you like a very, I guess, like anodyne, watered down version of a conversation, so to speak.
Well, like when you say like, there, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, like there was definitely a time in my life where I could have just drowned myself in movies and TV shows and review channels, because I was the guy that consumed like Nostalgia Critic, Red Letter Media, like so many other of these review channels. I think that's actually like one of my first red pills was like why is nothing good, and why are they trying to build a message that only serves like a tiny fraction of the population? Because like even like your average just like shit lib likes good storytelling. Like even they enjoy like a hero's journey, or even they enjoy like some kind of conflict. Like I don't get the people that like the Mary Sue of Ren from Star Wars. I don't get the people that just watch the Marvel movie over and over again, where it's like, okay, the good guys won because the sequel is coming out and the sequel is coming out. Yeah, I actually posited this to one of my friends where it's like the more interesting Star Wars movie would be in between the new trilogy and the prequel trilogy. Like, what if you actually saw like the rise of the New Order? You can make it like a Weimar Germany kind of thriller where it's like you don't have to agree that like the order rose, but like that's a better story than just retelling the original 70s Star Wars.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I actually kind of agree that there is a red pill to be found in. Wait a minute, why does media suck? Why does it all tell the same story? Because
Or why they're remaking everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why is this? Like, obviously, there's always this temptation to be like, we truly live in the worst generation. Like everything sucks now, and some of that's just like people with like a Cassandra personality. But there's also something to be said for the fact that, like, no, really, all movies are remakes of something else now. You know, like if you look at what movies are actually coming out and which are truly new properties or unconnected to a franchise, it's almost nothing, you know? And then there's also another red pill, which is like, well, does complaining about this forever do anything? You know, and I think a lot of people kind of like post Gamergate was like, wait a minute, we did what we were supposed to. We made our complaints known as consumers. You know, we boycotted, we told them we want it changed, and it didn't work. You know, and I think for a lot of people at that moment, the conclusion was like, all right, then, well, then this is a wait a minute, there's a bigger problem here. This isn't just my entertainment sucks. But to me, at least, like, I kind of look back into that sphere of like media analysis with guys who are still complaining about like my libtards ruining my gaming. You know, like I just want my, you know, my big titty Mortal Kombat girls and
I just wanted to play video.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, I mean, you really want to go back? Like, is this your end goal in this? Is just to have you know, like better soiling?
I think that's what's so important about our sphere now, and Prude talks about it a lot, where he said like the only like new books he's been reading are published by our guys, whether it's like T.R. Hudson or whether it's Dan Baltic, you know, guys that have projects that are on Amazon. I'm not saying, you know, you should go buy on Amazon all the time, but like it is, I think we are seeing like the beginning of the wave of alternative media and storytelling. Like, I don't think we're going to be able to produce our own movies because we can't just like attach all of our names to something or like have like convince like, you know, local actors to like, hey, we're going to do something that's really based and like really against everything you believe in. But we are, at least we're doing streams, we're, you know, we're making memes, we're creating books. So like there's no reason to be black-pilled, but oh yeah,
No,
this
definitely,
like a lot
man.
of people think it did work. When they went woke, then they're gonna go broke in 2 weeks. Yeah, they never
Right,
went
yeah,
broke,
like
did
it
they?
obviously it doesn't work. But I mean, like I've got, you know, I've got Thomas's second book, you know, on the way here, and I try to buy, you know, books from our guys because there's a lot of people who are really talented. And like Dave Martell, he runs, you know, the Bizarre Archives, and like if you're
Mhm.
looking for, you know, fiction from our guys, there's plenty of it. And like we really are, as Gio says, living in a content renaissance. But anyway, man, we got a couple guys behind you. So is there anything you want to say to kind of wrap up your section of this?
Yeah,
Wait,
guys,
before we get into that, Scardo, you're too young. You have to go. You have to wake up early for school tomorrow. You leave, please. Your parents would not let you watch this.
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
This is a stream for mature adults where we talk about the X-Files and yeah, never mind. You
Beavers.
belong here. Never mind. I can't even kick you
He
out.
was
But
sick.
anyway,
Oh
Cody.
my gosh. Yeah, it just that made me feel old. Yeah, guys, just love the Lord. Keep making memes. You can find me at Cody B Presente on Twitter. DM me for anything, and I'll see you guys all in Burden's chat.
All right, talk to you later, man. All right, Saddam, how you doing?
Hey, good about you, Jack. How you been?
Good. You're a little low. Let me adjust your volume. Can you talk again?
Yeah, better.
Yeah, you sound better now.
All right. Yeah, you caught me a little off guard. I was gonna talk to you in a couple months when I had actually gone through something to say something, but I guess I can talk.
Yeah, no worries, man. I'm glad to have you back on. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed, you know, talking to you in you know, in the Telegram group, and so I'm glad to finally have as much of a, you know, face-to-face conversation as I guess you can on the internet, right?
Yeah, well, whenever the Christmas party gets booted back up this year, we'll exchange white elephant gifts again.
Yeah, that sounds fun, man. So anyway, what have you been doing recently? Are you're still in grad school, right?
Yeah, still in grad school. Just got out of my last class for the year or for the semester. We just do the rest of the stuff online until May, but it gives me time to work on some policy papers and read pretty much. So
Yeah, what do you? And obviously, I'm not asking you to dox yourself, but like, what actually is a policy paper for you? Do you essentially just like find a current issue, or is it just something more broad?
So my current policy paper, well, two of them, I guess. One's going to be about Colombia and demilitarization of FARC, and what policy implications that would have for the government. Another one would be a complex humanitarian emergency, and that's going to be looking at El Salvador and possibly how that can be salvaged. So pretty much just go through the history, what other policies have been implemented, and any recommendations, and they can be addressed to a state government or the UN or a nonprofit.
That's interesting. I always forget that there are people in our circles who actually like do real important stuff, instead of just like sit on the internet and shitpost.
Yeah, that's my trial was fantastic. I'm still embodied in several people though, especially this current form, I guess. But yeah, I meant to. How have you been getting along with that paper I sent you? How long ago was that?
Oh shit! I completely forgot to read it. I've been all over the place. I need to bookmark that because I talked to enough people on Telegram, which is where you sent it to me, that if it falls out of like, if I have to scroll down, it'll get buried. So actually, just let me find that and I'll read that tomorrow because I have the time to read it and I want to.
That sounds good, man. Well, I guess I can fill dead air with.
Sorry, I'm actually looking for it. Yeah. Okay, I see that.
Yeah, I've been reading a book, The Mukaddima, by Ibn Khaldun. I think I've mentioned it a couple times, maybe on your channel. I can go through that if you want.
Yeah, sure, man.
So, background information for everyone listening. Written by Ibn Khaldun in the 14th century, Arab philosopher. He traveled the known world, the Maghreb, the West, North Africa, pretty much cataloging why.
Sorry, I'm distracting you from actually talking about something important by just.
No, you're good. I'm actually
Cody shit posting.
No, I'm a neolib, Cody. That's different. But anyway, so he had a theory of history, pretty much cyclical history. Pretty much one of the first people to come about in the non-Western tradition because he followed from. He was pretty well read in the Greeks, Aristotle, Plato, Polybius, etc. Like most Arabs were. They actually they'll teach you this in little philosophy classes that most of the Arab civilizations actually translated the Greek text back into Arabic, and then it got retranslated back into English and German later on. So that's kind of what saved a lot of the old texts because they had it from the original Greek sources. But anyway, he had this theory of history, like I was talking about, but he also had theories on the human body, and he had theories on culture as well. So I can read this small passage from Food and Its Influence on Human Beings. Blah, blah, blah. A great amount of food and the moisture it contains generates pernicious superfluous matters in the body, which in turn produce a disproportionate widening of the body, as well as many corrupt putrid humors, gives you a pale complexion. And he also talks about the difference in between the animals in certain regions. As well, he also mentions that pretty much you can't have a civilization that's not within the Mediterranean, due to its warm climate and generally stable sea. He said that the sun has effects on blacks. He says it makes them too carefree and too happy to want to build anything important.
What was I mean, there's actually, so there's an old black-pilled Devon Stack stream on Odyssey because I've been catching up on his backlog, and there's actually there's a little bit of truth to that in other animals, right? Obviously, humans are different. None of these rules apply to humans in any ways. It only true of other animals. But specifically, he examined it with bees. Right, that specifically Africanized bees, kind of like colloquially known as killer bees, right, display very different characteristics than European ones, largely due to things like predators and the seasonal cycles, and that produces really different behavior, right, specifically around like aggression and like the way that they approach resources. And again, I realize I'm on YouTube, he's on Odyssey, so he has a lot more, I guess, like latitude when it comes to these topics. But at least in some other animals, that your your Arab friend might be onto something here.
Yeah, it's a huge text. I mean, he goes through in what you would call autistic detail, detailing all the zones that people can live in from 1 through 8, and mentions all their characteristics, the people there, how they came to be there, and stuff like that. But he really came out with this idea of cyclical history due to in the 1400s there was a lot of Berber invasions, and Berbers, for anyone who don't know, are the native, somewhat Africanized peoples in Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, etc. That were pretty much desert nomads for most of their existence. And what they would do is a city would become too decadent. It was ruled by the previous Berber dynasty, and it would become too decadent, and a tribe would come in from the desert, hardy and well adjusted, and they would take over the city immediately because the city was too lavish and they didn't care to defend themselves. And so the theory goes that this first generation, they do exceptionally well because they're hardy and from the desert. And the second generation, they're a little bit less hardy because they've been brought up in the city, and they but they're still at least somewhat related to their fathers. And they if they didn't grow up in the desert, they they at least had some of the wherewithal to understand what to do, right? But then as you get further on with the grandchildren and great
Sorry, there's some great bee posting in the chat. But anyway, man, you were saying. Sorry.
Are they the new beavers?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, beavers versus ducks versus bees. It's a tough situation. Fuck, what did I hear the other day about?
This has been the most unorganized stream, but don't worry, man.
No, well, I was hearing something about 650 the other day. 650. It was something about 6% of the population. Anyway, I don't. Anyway, yeah, but the grandchildren are even farther removed, and then the great grandchildren don't even know the great grandfathers, and so that's what allows them to be decadent and be taken over by the next tribe. And that's pretty much what happened all across the Maghreb, the West. You also saw that, especially in Spain with the Taifas. And so I don't know if you can take anything from that rambling.
No, it's interesting because there's actually something similar that you saw with, the steppe people invading China, right? Was there this kind of like continual process of like soyification, where these, like hardened barbarians would roll in, and that first generation would be almost unbeatable. Their children would integrate to the society, and 3 or 4 generations down the road, it would be they'd be the same. They would have just been absorbed into the mass. And I guess this is kind of the truth of Frank Herbert's Dune as well. You do need to kind of have material hardship. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by chat because this is hilarious. But yeah, man, that's interesting. And who did you say that was again?
That's Ibn Khaldun. Let me throw it in the chat real quick.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I will be the first to admit I've read very, very little from the Muslim world, like vanishingly little.
I try to. I'm going to try to change that for most people. I might try to do AA's stream, his video contest, and might try to pull from that. But yeah, I guess I'm the premier Arabist, as in there's only one of me, so no one can take the title. Yeah, I try to I try to introduce people to certain kind of topics because the Persians aren't all, the Arabs are somewhat okay, but along with that, to totally jump ship, I've been also interested in Baptist theology because I've been told several times that there aren't really many theologians, or Baptists are really not predisposed to theologians. There are several obviously major ones like Spurgeon and and John Bunyan. But yeah, I'm gonna be looking into that to try to, because I am actually white. You know, I just LARP as an Arab online. So
Yeah, when I first met you, I was incredibly surprised that you sounded like how you did, because I just assumed that if you went by Saddam Hussein, you know, you were some like kind of like bizarre towel head, and I was very surprised, you know, when you picked up the call. But anyway, man, is there anything else? Because I will say, if you do end up doing a recorded video, I'll be happy to show it, because you have a wealth of very specific knowledge, and that sounds like it would be really interesting.
well, you don't have to lie, Jay. It's okay. You can.
Look, you're talking to someone who has a vast ocean of inch deep knowledge, and I know absolutely nothing specific about anything. And so I'm kind of fascinated by experts, you know, even in, you know, relatively small fields, right?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Jay. Yeah, if I ever get around to it in between school, I'll let you know. But I appreciate it, Jay. You're a good friend. So
All right, sure thing, man. I'll talk to you later.
all right, see you.
Well, the stream really is over because you're here.
Well, the disrespect. No, I just noticed I just noticed I was on there.
No, if you didn't notice, you were not the last person to join this, but I was like, well, if I bring you on, we're talking for 2 hours. So I figured
Who's
I'd let
next?
everyone else
Who's next first? So I can time myself.
Yeah, really. I was about to say, this is your second time on in a week.
Yeah, true that. I probably shouldn't take too long. No, I mean I'm just
No, man, I'm fine. I'm just busting your balls.
I'm just here to celebrate the complete turnip seed victory that occurred at the LCMS.
Yeah. So what happened with that? Like I said, I've been kind of forcefully removed from Twitter, but I've kind of heard it in like second order effects, I guess.
Several people, including myself, have been like really like sounding the alarm bells all year long. Last year, like kind of like the problem of using the framework and words of your enemy, because once you accept your enemy's framework to define yourself, you kind of already lost the game. It's like kind of a really dumb thing to do.
Oh yeah, completely.
You know, like I as an architect, this is something that I think it's something that goes back to ancient Egypt, but like they were really sensitive about like not allowing the architect's measuring tools to be like stolen or known about, because once you knew the architect's tools, like the metrics and scales and ratios that he used, you could instantly figure out everything he built. Like it's like a signature. It's like the DNA of a building. And so like in the same logic, once you like once you use the tools of your enemy, you kind of become them a little bit. But also, like, once you kind of train your ear to like know the language of like, you know, like Marxism and progressives, you can see all the problems that are built by it. But anyway, so as far as that, because like, you know, I've never really been formally a part of the LCMS. I just enjoyed occasionally going to the churches and find the theology really good. But you know, they've had a growing progressive problem, as with every church these days, and for some reason or another, they decided to do a new catechism, which is like, you know, the teaching tool that a church has. Right. And it was just riddled with these commentaries that are basically using a Marxist framework, like, you know, accepting that some people have transgendered self-identity or like homosexual identity. Which you know, like these are not concepts that are like domestic to Christianity. These are like secular concepts that are being imported into Christianity. Like you, as some people have said, you're not in Christianity identified by your sins. You're identified by your grace and forgiveness from Christ. So once you've accepted the framework that like that you're not just a human, you're like a gay human or a straight human or like this human or that human. You've basically like you've started from the wrong base, right? Like no one cares about your opinion because you're starting from the incorrect framework. You've revealed if you know the framework of the enemy, you know that this person's using the framework of the enemy. And so the catechism, full of these commentaries of just like completely alien philosophy from Christianity, was published as the official catechism of the LCMS, which is just like, A, how did this happen? B, why is this happening? And C, who let the, you know, like who let this happen? There's a clear breakdown of like just like regular review of theology, which really pissed everyone off. And so Turnip wrote, you know, Turnip has a lot of reach because he's a growing young lad, and some of us made sure to pump that post that he did as far as we could. And it took off, and it got about 200,000 views. I think it's now like the top result if you search the LCMS on Twitter. So it's like the branded LCMS like thing that's happening. Everyone knows about this controversy outside of the LCMS too now. So it's kind of like a shame unto the church. But once it rang a lot of alarms, the president of the LCMS decided, oh, this doesn't look very good. cancel the orders. Bring it back. And just, it was a complete like shit show basically.
Yeah, I'm really curious because you're right. I just want to know where this came from.
Well, like as is typical with most corporations, the president delegates responsibilities to under guys that like kind of don't often go directly to the president, or the president's too busy to pay attention to alarms being around. So it's a failure of hierarchy, it's a failure of structure, it's a failure of review. And like there's still a lot of pastors that are like middle of the road. Oh, maybe it wasn't malice. Maybe it was malice. Just shut up. It was malice. You have a cancer in your organization. You have to exercise it. You have to, people are afraid to excommunicate people these days. You have to excommunicate these people. You have to deny them the communion, and you have to call them to repentance. That's just the facts you have to do. If you're not up to the job of leading a church and taking your responsibilities that have to be done, get out of the way and have someone do it that they can. And this is an overarching problem in pretty much every Christian denomination today. People are afraid to like say, hey, that violates our doctrines. That's not us. You're excommunicated until you repent. People, I don't know why people are afraid. Like this is just basic, like minimum effort responsibilities as like keeping a hierarchy intact, and no one wants to do it. Like no one wants to do it in any denomination. Sorry, I just ranted there a lot. I'm just really angry about all this.
No, I completely agree, and it's weird. I was talking to George Bagby, who will be on the Jay Burden Show tomorrow night. If you want to hear us talk about the Second Great Awakening, how's that for shilling?
Nice.
But we were talking about this, where there is like conquest laws are very much proven in churches, right? Is that you see this in churches all the time, where there is this kind of like slow creep and degradation and kind of like triumph of entropy, right? Where there's this kind of like narrow end of the wedge that someone forces in, and then kind of like slowly and passively the wedge just moves and moves and moves, and it seems like, at least hopefully, that Ryan successfully, I guess, like blocked, the narrow end of the wedge. Because, and I'm sure you've noticed this in other institutions, right? That once that language is part of the institution, right, it becomes weaponized. Like it's the classic Mott and Bailey.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, well, when you're introducing it, it's the most narrow reading of that phrase.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're enforcing it, it's the most like all encompassing one you can imagine. And again, my point in this is not to say the left is bad, because obviously we all know the left is bad. But, nonetheless, right, it is interesting to see it in action and to see someone, at least it seems, successfully resist it.
Yeah, there's a part of me that doesn't even want to call it left wing. It's just evil. Like it's just fucking evil.
It is just pure evil.
You are corrupting the word of God because some dumb retired professor told you this is the way to view the world, and you in your very low IQ stature just accepted that framework. And like in many ways, I don't even blame them, because like they're just robots that accepted the framework that was given to them. But my God, do I just really fucking hate it. It's like the fact that these people are in leadership roles at all suggests to me that like this problem goes back decades. It was just with a cancer, anytime you have cancer, it's something that happened decades prior. The cells just took decades to like slowly grow in a cancerous way and then finally burst out of their little like tumor. This is probably something that goes back to the 80s and 70s that is just now finally bursting, and the rot has been revealed, basically. You ever play Mass Effect? Actually, here's a random tangent, but you ever play Mass Effect?
No, I actually haven't.
Okay, this is gonna this is gonna be something we have to review at some point in the future. It's a really great science fiction, but there's this scene in the first game. Sorry, I'm looking up the dialogue line I'm looking for. What is it? So the overall premise of the game is that humanity found these ruins on Mars, found the technology of a dead civilization. We're like, oh boy, free tech upgrade. Let's just like go to space with it. And what they discover about 30 years later, or 40 years later, is that the tech was actually like kind of left there on purpose, and that by using the technology, you've actually like fallen into the predetermined developed line that was meant for you. And this is a big theme in there. And so there's this one line. There's this one line where the aliens who like left behind the technology, like you manage to come to contact with them, and you're not really supposed to, but you like find a way to contact like some leftover being from that race that left them. It's like a AI starship, and it's sovereign, and it basically says this really cool line, like the spaceship reveals that the technology from the dead race you found isn't theirs. It's actually ours. They died because they used it. You're gonna die because you used it. And basically the line is organic civilizations rise, evolve, advance, and at the apex of their glory they are extinguished. The Protheans, those are the other aliens. The Protheans were not the first. They did not create all this technology. They merely found it, the legacy of my kind. Your civilization is based on the technology of our kind, our technology. By using it, your civilization develops along the paths we desire. We impose order on the chaos of organic life. You exist because we allow it, and you will end because we demand it. And it's like a really good line. The entire series basically revolves around the problem that when you accept like a gift from someone, you kind of become that someone. Like this is a means by conquest that's often overlooked. And you see this in history all the time. The Native Americans that accepted Western technology became westernized, and they became stronger. And by just natural forces, they were able, like, if you didn't die from the Westerners' diseases, you died from the natives who adopted the Western framework, because you were just left behind. And in many ways, America does this too. Like we overfund anyone willing to sign up for our worldview, and those forces get stronger. They would defeat the local forces that are not aligned with us by natural consequence of aligning with us. And over a long enough time span, you basically always win without even having to fight a war, basically. This is a very slow method of conquest, but it wins. It always wins because you're always ahead of the game. And it only really works if you're starting from it only works if you're just a little bit advantaged. But if you wedge it correctly, you can basically conquer anything. Sorry, I've been ranting a lot about, but there's some thoughts. It's a great game to play to learn these lessons. And I think people that played that game in the early 2000s might have been accidentally like got in on the plan a little bit. I was like the kind of I've noticed people that notice these things are the people that played that game in the early 2000s.
Well, I feel like you could kind of say the same thing about Deus Ex, right? That in a weird way, there are several games from kind of like the 2000s, that seem to be kind of like oddly prescient. Prince of Parma for 14 Rand. And by the way, Prince of Parma, if you skip back to the beginning, I wrote out your super chat, so I did go back to them. And we have Luthemplar, theology and sci-fi. Yeah, pretty much, actually.
Yeah, and history. I could go into history. No.
Oh, okay. So here's one thing I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about architecture, because
oh boy,
I'm kind of continually. I guess I'm not doxing. You've revealed that you work in architecture. Right?
I work in architecture. I'm Rob. I'm in Brooklyn. I don't care about getting doxed because my boss loves me, and he would never fire me for being spicy because he's spicy too.
Well, fair enough then, right? But nonetheless, what I meant to say is that I'm kind of fascinated by the relationship between the creator and the consumer, so to speak. In the sense that like we see this, and this is kind of what I was talking to Cody about. There's this kind of lie of the free market, right? Which is that you tell the creator what you want, and through like the mechanism of the invisible hand, they will replicate that. But to me, at least, and maybe the breakdown is really who is the consumer, but it seems to me that relationship breaks down significantly in architecture. So could you, I guess, describe what you see as kind of like the relationship between who pays for buildings and who designs them?
Yeah, this is something I've noticed too, where like if you learn architecture and all the little like signaling and dog whistles and things that go into it, the only people that are going to understand that are other architects. The client half the time doesn't know what the fuck you're doing, and the common person doesn't. So in many ways, architecture is a very, very slow method of communicating across generations. You're indoctrinated into the discipline through education and experience, and once you learn it, you start noticing that the buildings are speaking to you. They have things to say, and in many ways, I can look at a building and I can read it like it's saying things to me. So a good example of that, Pantheon in Rome. You know that, the big dome.
Yes.
What does that building say to you if you look at it? Bring up a photo if you want. I don't care.
No, I don't know how to use StreamYards that well. But I mean, I guess basically it would be like I am a proud and confident civilization, essentially.
All right. Well, you're wrong.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so what do you
No,
mean?
joking. No. I mean, like, yeah, the Pantheon is it's the oldest concrete dome in Europe. It's approaching 2,000 years old. I think it's 2,000 years old now. It might be like it's going to become, if it's not 2,000 years old already, it'll be 2,000 years old within my lifetime, probably. No, probably a little bit off. But in the roof of it. So if you look at the building in section, and I'm saying this. Oh, you dropped something.
Yeah, never mind. I didn't mean to unmute myself or drop something. So again, professional podcasting.
So there are no sections and plans from when the building was originally designed. These things have all turned to dust. But if you go into the building and take the measurements, I wrote a Substack article about the measuring stick. Once you have the architect's measuring stick, you know who built it and what they were thinking. You will find that the proportions of the Pantheon are based off of the human cranium, the human skull. The sphere is about the size of a brain. The dome actually forms I think a perfect sphere to the floor. It's actually a sphere. It's not a dome. The dome has been lifted up enough to make a perfect sphere within the space within it. It may look like a cylinder with a dome on top, but it's actually, in negative space terms, the proportions of a sphere, and it's based off the human cranium. The circle on the top is thought to represent the incoming of knowledge from above. This shows up in anything from like a monkish tonsure, how they shave the hole on the top of the head, to many cultures had this idea that you shave the top of the head to like increase the efficiency of learning. It was kind of a myth, but it shows up in buildings that have the proportion of the human skull, where they like kind of leave in that little detail of shaving the top of the head in a monkish way. It's not a Christian building, of course. It was a pagan building, but pagans also had monkish tonsures too. The rings on the dome on the top, structurally, they're meant to lighten the load of the concrete so that it doesn't fall down. It also helps with a little bit of compression, contraction over time from gravity, so that the concrete doesn't crack as much. But the rings also form the because they're orbiting around a central oculus, that most people think they actually represent the 5 known planets that could be seen at the time. So each of these rings, which are like they're rings of square details. If you look at the Pantheon from inside, looking up to the oculus, you'll find these, like, I think it's 5 rectilinear rings that go around it, rings of rectangles, and they're scaled inside. They're not all the same size. They're scaled in size, and it appears to be aligned to the brightness of the planets you can see at night. And of course, these are 5 rings of planets orbiting a central oculus of the sun. So some people speculate this is a heliocentric interpretation, representing knowledge from astronomy incoming into the brain. And of course, at the bottom are little atriums for each of the planets, Jupiter, Saturnus, like all the famous planet gods. So it's pretty clearly an astronomical building. It's meant to like encode secret knowledge of astronomy. And it has a heliocentric model, which was kind of like kept secret by people. There are myths associated with each of these gods. Most famous, Saturnilius, this planet Saturn, is said to be in chains. Of course, as a ring. So these are like ancient wisdom that was inferred across generations in the form of buildings that you won't find written in books, but they're written onto the surface of the building. So these and this knowledge in architecture related to astronomy can be traced back to ancient Egypt, because they had methods of like really, really, really primitive telescopes. I'll go on that another time. But yeah, so like the Pantheon speaks across thousands of years of collected astronomical knowledge related to the human brain and learning, and it's basically trying to tell those who can read the building If you want to learn about the order of reality, look up to the stars and study them. And if you go deeper into it and you find, the years in which this building was built are shortly after the conquest of Britain. And if you look at the places that Rome was conquering, there were buildings like this in Britain. The Celtics are famous for their circular buildings like Stonehenge. They had others that haven't quite survived but are written about. And it appears that many of this design styles, like the Pantheon, are about a decade or two after the conquests of these ocular buildings in Gaul and Britain. And so it is very likely that the designer of the Pantheon, the architect, whoever it was, because I don't know if the architect's really known, it was likely studying British astronomical culture. And of course, the Pantheon itself is derived from the earlier design of Nero's Golden House, which features the same oculus design, which was, I think, done a decade earlier. Nero's Golden House, Nero built it for himself. I forget if Nero was the one who did the Pantheon also, but that kind of inner circle of Roman Caesars, sorry. They all kind of same story. Czar comes from Caesar, so same word. Sorry, my Slavic origin myth is glowing a bit.
So I'm curious,
yeah,
have you seen that documentary where they actually found essentially a bricked up part of Nero's Golden House?
No. what was behind the Golden House?
Oh no, it wasn't. Maybe it was his pleasure palace. I can't remember, but it was one of Nero's buildings that had been destroyed. But a large part of it had been initially thought to have been destroyed and actually just been built over top of. And so relatively recently, they found a large segment of it that was still relatively well preserved. And I don't know if you can actually go there, but there's some documentary. I can find it later and show it to you. But it's quite interesting because it's incredibly well preserved, and especially the frescoes in it are almost undisturbed. Because it's quite common for those to be either vandalized or painted over the course of the years. But it's well worth looking at because it's a pretty I don't know, it's a pretty unique look because so many of those things are just incredibly worn down by the elements.
Yeah, that's a good thing because a lot of people look at these old facades and statues and things and think, oh, they look kind of fugly. When in reality, it's just because they've aged. They were probably quite precise and beautiful back in the day.
Well, right, and that's the classic, all of these, you can actually tell due to some type of chemistry that I'm too stupid to understand, the pigments that were used to paint all of these classical statues.
Yeah,
right? And they were not particularly subtle. Because many of them were placed on top of state buildings, right? So they were designed to be observed at, maybe 50 yards or something. And so they were very garishly painted in pure lead white and, bright red.
Yeah,
just kind of contrasting tones.
Famously, the Roman emperors were Germanic in appearance.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? Because obviously, the "we was kings" crowd are an easy
earlier. I should emphasize the earlier emperors. Later on, they became very med.
Did you say mid or med?
Why not both? No offense to the swarthy kin that I'm insulting.
The swarthoids, yeah. Full offense is intended, of course. But yeah, no, that is an interesting point. But anyway, you were going back and talking about kind of the buried language inside of architecture, right? So other than the classical world, are there more modern examples you can think of?
Well, that's the funny thing because around the 1960s, the architects kind of reject this 2003, probably 4,000 or 5,000 year old tradition. Not only these are traditions that are not only in Europe. You have similar traditions in Asia and India, especially. And it's to some degree Ethiopia, and Arabia. How could I forget that? But the Europeans famously threw away all of their traditions in the 1950s and became completely retarded. And so now you kind of only see the proportions of Kobu and a lot of the modernists, and these are of course utterly egalitarian fluff pieces. And so the buildings now record the mythos of modernity, and of course how ironic that they rot away so quickly compared to the ancients.
So that's a valid question. I have somewhat of an insight because I've just worked construction before, but why is it that all modern buildings just turn to dust in 15, 30 years?
Oh boy, is that a hell of a story, but mostly our concrete shit. And this is more so a product of just not having good sources anymore. Roman concrete famously lasts thousands of years because it has a volcanic molecule. I think it's some kind of aluminum substance, silicate, that like has the ability to basically heal from the especially on the coast, like something in the salt water or the dust near the coast. It basically can heal itself, and so it's like a smart material. And so the Roman concrete was essentially far superior to anything today. Americans famously had something called Rosedale concrete. And this is a fun story. Look up Rosedale concrete ever. If you want to do like a show on American concrete, I can go hours on length about this.
Honestly, I would. So yeah, feel free. Go ahead.
A quick review, basically. Rosedale concrete, I think it's Rosedale. It's a mine in New York, now shut down. It was operating, I think, between like the 17th, 18th century era, famously used on buildings such as Brooklyn Bridge, a large amount of Boston and Pennsylvania, and also famously several forts in Florida. This cement unknowingly was a close cousin of Roman cement, Roman concrete. And as a result, structures built with it have the same longevity as the Roman concrete, which you'll still find a lot in. And this is one of the reasons why America's colonial buildings are still standing while everything since this mine shut down isn't really. So the fun little detail of why our older buildings are so much better. We were accidentally using Roman concrete. And up until the 1970s or so, we didn't know that it was like Roman concrete. And so when it did get damaged, we would just replace it with ordinary Portland cement that replaced Rosedale. And for the longest time, it was this mystery. Like, why is it these structures that we built back in the 1700s, the second we repair them, they start rotting? Like, what's wrong? What's going on? And I think it was like in the 60s or 70s, there was a whole research into like in America's historic societies, like why is our concrete rotting faster than the colonial concrete? And they found out Rosedale concrete was far superior and well worth a lot better. Famously, there was this fort in Florida. I think it's Fort Jefferson. But they were repairing the brickwork on Fort Jefferson with Portland cement. And within like a few years after the repairs, the salt water had eaten away at the repairs and made everything worse. And just there's like, why is this cement rotting this building? Like the oldest cement is lasting, the newer cement is falling apart in a decade. And they basically found out that Rosedale cement had the same properties, similar properties, not same, as Roman cement, and so it was just superior. Since then, there's been efforts to reopen the mine or find similar sources to like get the same quality, but Portland cement just doesn't last very well. There's attempts to make rubber hybrid material. Like there are these methods of making cement where you can include a little bit of a rubber quality to it, and you make up for the lack of self-healing by having the ability to resist cracking, but it's not as strong, so it can only really be a facade. Sorry,
yeah. I'm curious, right? One of the things that you constantly hear is basically this idea that like, oh, we can't make solid structures anymore because the population is too high. There are too many people. Do you think that's true? Do you think that we're just kind of like doomed to this like reality of disposable structures, or is it just something we are not interested in solving?
It's the same reason why we stopped doing decorations. A, it's lazy. B, it's cheaper. Americans really became like real like, what's the word? Shifers. I don't know. Like they became really sleazy in the 19 like 30s, 40s, and 50s, and just got really lazy with quality. And the best thing, like oh, it's minimalist, it's modern, it's clean, but really what they're saying is it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's easier to deal with. No, we basically said that it's cheaper, the higher maintenance cost, but line go up, so we don't have to worry about that.
Well, it is weird because, like I said, I've been going on kind of like a re-examination of like, kind of like the roots of shysters. That's Richard Cook.
Shysters,
That's the word you were looking for.
Sorry, I don't know my Yiddish too well.
Yeah, I was about to say I got nothing on that one. I was just leaving you dangling. I had no suggestions, but I've been kind of re-examining kind of like the roots of like Goldwater conservatism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it, it is basically a worldview which has only one, I guess, like metric to measure any like policy, which is basically, does it make baby boomers richer or poorer? Does it in any way inconvenience them? If so, we have to get rid of it. If not, sacrifice anything, to keep those pensions rolling in. And again, I don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to just blame everything on a previous generation, because I think that can turn into kind of intellectual laziness. But you do have to look at it at a certain point and be like, all right, like, what the hell? Like, we had a long like pattern of kind of like not spending down the capital, of always leaving more for the next generation.
Yeah.
And once that chain is broken.
We only changed that like in the Bush era, right?
I would argue before that, because I would argue that essentially what Reagan was doing was turning Reagan and Thatcher, and were basically turning boomer greed into like the one motivating force of like politics, right? And even before then, you could argue in the US with Johnson, like the Great Society, right? It was like spend down all of this capital we've built up, like no matter what, So I would argue that it happened earlier than Bush, although I'm not a huge Bush fan myself. He definitely like kicked it into high gear, like turning, the military into this massive Keynesian enterprise. But nonetheless,
being a early '90s birth, I remember vaguely this news article on the telly about Clinton getting into saving mode rather than deficit spending mode. I don't remember what year that happened.
Yeah, that would have been first term Clinton, and then second term Clinton, a whole new collection of individuals came into power in the Democratic Party, and he changed his tune. It's interesting actually, because weirdly enough, the Lewinsky scandal plays into that. I'm kind of a
the faction that took over. That's the like call sign, right? Like sneak a lady in to corrupt the guy, and then all the people blocking our progress suddenly
the Italians, right? I was trying to be discreet, but nonetheless, right? We're essentially, and it did really represent a transition in the Democratic Party, right? Where first term Clinton, and Clinton's always been a scumbag, don't get me wrong, but if you look at what he said, he basically ran like all right, we're done with the Cold War, time to, I can't remember what he called it. He called it something dividend, right? Which is basically this idea that we have this huge windfall from the Cold War winding down. Now we can kind of like, like go back to being a normal country again, at least allegedly, right? That was what was sold. But through a combination of getting absolutely demolished, by the Republicans in the midterms, and then the Monica Lewinsky scandal, he basically was in dire need of assistance. And that assistance came in the form of a PR guy whose name I cannot remember. But that he was, the guy who really like promoted the use of focus groups in America. And so this is like, I can't remember the phrase that was really popular. We're looking for a hand up, not a handout, things like that. And that was really when like the focus group became such a like major part of American politics. And like with it, right, like the idea that we would ever be a normal country again, a country that didn't just like, wasn't continually on a weird like halfway war footing. Well, that was never going to happen again. Anyway, I have quite a lot of contempt for Clinton. I think that his weird like fake crying, like which he used to do all the time, was really creepy and weird. Saddam Hussein for $5. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate the time, Mr. Burden, and I appreciate having you on. Prince of Parma for 14 Rand, asking for this one for you, Lou Templar. What are your thoughts on Grant's tomb? Oh,
that's that's by my neck of the woods. I think it means tomb. Tome?
I don't know. I got nothing on that.
Well, there's Grant's tomb by my master's. I went to Columbia I'm an Ivy League kid, of course, typical. I visited Grant's tomb. It was a nice little area to visit. I don't like Grant's tomb's design. The exterior is fine. The interior, for some reason, they put Grant in this well pit of sorts. So you don't actually go to Grant's body. His body's like at the bottom of a well for whatever ungodly reason. I think it represents his drunken despair. I don't know. I think
Actually,
it's a,
speaking about American corruption, Grant is an infamously corrupt president.
well, he was a fucking drunk. I don't know if he even knew what the hell he was signing at the time. I think his wife was either ugly or insane. I know Lincoln was that, but I don't know about Grant. I think Grant and Lincoln got together because they both hated their wives, honestly.
Yeah, that's one of those odd like myths of America, was that Lincoln was this like great speaker. He was kind of infamously he had an infamously annoying voice, from what I remember.
It wasn't like high pitched or something.
Yeah, I think so. Like I think that he had a notably I
Yeah,
guess
well.
irritated. Actually, much like
No
was it-
children.
Yeah, right. Wait, no, Lincoln had children. One of them was killed in the Civil War. I think it was Tom Lincoln. I can't remember. Sorry, this is not particularly important. But there was one of the Virginia Randolphs, right, who were kind of like a famous, founding stock family. But I think it was John Randolph, who was this odd, like kind of like proto-libertarian type signer. It was John Randolph, but he was infamous for essentially not having gone through puberty.
Oh, yeah, one of those.
Yeah. So he was like really, really short and odd, and like he had an extremely high voice, never had children. And I think he ended up emancipating his slaves. And then when he emancipated his slaves, he sent them to Ohio, and Ohio immediately sent them back because they didn't want them.
I can kind of really. I have a famously. I have a broken regulatory system. So like on some days my testosterone will be like 3 times a normal human, and then other days will be like a third of a normal human. And depending on which day, I'll either have a very deep voice or a very light voice. It's kind of hilarious. But like I love it when it's like 3 times a normal human, because then I can like run like 8 miles and not give a shit because I'm superhuman mode.
I like the idea that like you essentially have the like you have steroids, but it averages out.
I know. It's really awful. Like it's annoying because like I can tell when it's low, and at that point I have to just like start running to force my body to start making testosterone, and then it like goes in overdrive, and like I will give myself heart damage if I don't slow down. I think a normal human has something. I don't remember the unit measurement, the SI unit measurement, but it's maybe let's say milligrams, whatever the hell it is. Most people have like something between like 600 to 700 milligrams of testosterone running through their blood. Me, I alternate between as low as 120 milligrams to as high as 1500 milligrams.
Jeez, that's like a bull shark. That's like
it's not healthy, man. and it's funny because like when it's in like broken mode and overcharging, I'll like get like really, really wild hair that like I look like a fucking wild man. Like imagine. Sorry, go on.
How long does this take? Is this like a 3-week cycle, or is it like weekly?
Yeah, about 5 weeks. Yeah, every 5 weeks, my body will break some way and like either crash. And when it goes down, I get like something called depersonalization disorder, because the testosterone is necessary for emotional regulation of the brain. And so when it crashes, your parts of your brain basically shut down. And when I'm in those modes, I'll have these like really weird spiritual experiences, because like you get kind of like detached from your own body and get like depressed, like and that's probably why a lot of the low T people are like fucked in the head, because they're depressed. And it'll just be really wild. I usually have pretty good prayer life at that time, and then when like it supercharges up to like 1500 milligrams, I'm like kind of forget to pray, can manage anything on my own. It's like, oh, I'm top of the world, buddy, get out of my way.
So Doug Dimmadome, I'm putting that on the screen, but I'm not reading that. You know what you did. You can't pay me to dance like a monkey. I'm not a whore. I don't do anything for money. I'm not reading that. And then Yevsey says Bingus or Floppa. Bingus, of course. What? All right, you're gone. All right, Pippi, how you doing, man?
Oh, hey. I just jumped in here and
no worries.
quickly made this.
Lou Templar for being a Floppa stan over. Anyway, man, how you doing?
Good. I'm sorry. I just came in here to crash really quickly. I didn't know if this topic was touched on yet, but the whole like ruralite and urbanite divide if anyone has had any insights into that.
Yeah, I spoke with that. I think when I was on the distributist, oh, hey, look, I just got back into my Twitter account. What do you know? I did not get permanently banned. Anyway, sorry. That was just an earlier topic. But I talked with a distributist about that because I live in kind of a semi-rural area. So like small town. But where are you from?
I live in a kind of more rural area. I don't know. Well, I don't think I'll ever get a job that I'll get fired from, but I'll still keep that. Still keep that to myself there. But I did used to live in California, if that says anything.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
yeah. No, I grew up in like the fake Santa Clarita suburbs where they have like East Coast trees with like sprinklers hooked up there all the time, but then on the
Oh,
outside
okay.
it's just pure shrubland desert.
Oh, that's truly a cursed
It was
area.
really weird. So I would leave the neighborhood and go out in like the weird shrubs and see mountain lions and random stuff out there. But
So I'm curious, right? How do you end up here as a kid from California? Because I have to imagine that it's a pretty it's a pretty liberated place.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess my parents were always that way. With the state I live in now is where my mom was. So I guess that's why. But my parents were always, I guess, kind of right wing. I vacillated around. The internet was never really a good thing. I was always on the internet. But I think just being robbed by the school system, I think, is what really
Oh, so what happened to you? Do you fall for kind of the like did it get a degree, everything will be fine kind of meme or something
No, I
else?
didn't do that. I'm glad. I totally. I mean, I didn't even really do public school in 6th grade. I went into homeschooling. I struggled so much through that. Because I guess I have a learning disability or whatever. Maybe it's made up for all I know. I don't know. But they never really wanted to test me or figure out a way to help me. So they stuck me in resource class where I was with well I don't, like, to put it kindly, retarded kids, and and I mean I excelled in resource, but then I'd go back to normal class, and then I have a bunch of makeup work, and I don't know. I mean, I was a rambunctious kid, and I was just tired of all the. I don't know. I was just kind of treated like a. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just the feminization that public school has. It forces you to act and be a certain way. It just
Yeah,
didn't. It just didn't jive.
this is an this is a deep piece of burden lore. But I actually got almost put into like a pretty serious special ed program because I refused to learn how to read. Like I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you can't make me do it. And so they genuinely thought that I was just damaged because I was like 8 or 9 years old and did not know how to read. And they took me to the specialist, and after like a long interview, she's like, no, this kid's fine. He's just stubborn. Like you just can't make him do anything. And so I was kind of lucky because my parents' reaction, before that was they just like took me out and homeschooled me, which I think was probably good for me. I think that if I had been like forced into it, it would have not ended up super well. But I also had for me, I got really disillusioned with school when I went to college, right? Which I think is pretty common.
Yeah. I skipped out on high school even. I didn't even experience that. So that was completely. I don't know. I guess I some people see it as a loss. I think I won in that situation.
Yeah,
But
I know what you mean. It's definitely difficult because on one hand, it's like it's a common experience, and you get to like you build up, I guess, like a shared base of, and I hate this word, but of trauma with other people. But at the
yeah.
same time, like a lot of it just sucks. Like there's no two ways around it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess I've been like isolated to try to focus on things. I don't know. So I guess that's why I'm a theory cell, or however
So,
it's said.
so sorry, man. I'm not familiar. Do you have your own work, or are you just a lurker?
No,
Not
I've
just. Are
I've
you a
been a
lurker?
lurker. I've been compiling stuff. I have no idea if I'll ever because I mean I just feel like other people say the similar things, but I don't know. I'm also, I guess, kind of into art,
Fair enough,
but I've been
man.
taking a break from that. I'm just trying to focus on either a job or my prospects, because I mean I want to actually get into farming, and then that's kind of going into the rural urban stuff, because I'm interested, because there you can see within um I don't know, like I guess this sphere, there are people that are more like urban, whatever, hobbit nationalist people, or rural hobbit nationalist people that, I don't know, they want mega shire, and then there's like the kind of futurist, uh techno, whatever, fash, or whatever you want to call it. There seems to be a divide, and I mean I'm not trying to dredge that up, because I mean that people always tit for
So
tat on
here's
that.
my thing with it. I think that the divide is kind of fake in a weird way, in the
Yeah,
sense
that's what
that,
I wanted to. Yeah, that's totally what I was going to get into. But go ahead, go ahead.
so to me at least, right, the divide is, it's kind of a problem because rural Americans rightfully feel like they got screwed over by urban Americans, right?
Yeah,
Because they did. They got screwed. Going back to the conversation about Bill Clinton, they really got screwed, over the entire last half of the 20th century.
yeah,
And they're also not wrong that they're probably better people than urban Americans. Not even probably. They are better people, right? Like you look at, any number of social issues. But the problem is that they're way less powerful than urban Americans. And they kind of have this copium fantasy of like cutting off the power to the cities, letting them all
yeah.
starve, and then just kind of like inheriting the whole continent.
That'll never happen.
I mean, like maybe you'd like that to happen, but it's not going to. Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's just not going to happen. And
No,
there's
yeah,
also this simultaneous cope from both sides where it's like we can beat urban or rural America, like we can win. But the problem is the very conception of this as a war is false. It's like our enemy's framing. And so, like, to be honest, it's just like the war between the sexes, that the way to win the war between the sexes is not to play the game to begin with. Like, you don't want a society in which urban America has completely defeated rural America or vice versa. Because to be honest, you need cities and you
yes.
need healthy, like, like rural communities. And again, the point is to try to like push towards some kind of like, I guess, like
Synthesis.
mutually, yeah, to push towards a synthesis. And again, like I say this as someone who loves like red state conservative Americans, but there is a lot of cope around it. So anyway, those are my thoughts. But do you
No,
have
yeah,
anything to add?
that's pretty much it. It seems that, like, like you said, rural America feels like, they've been dunked on, and constantly, uh am I allowed to swear? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you're allowed to swear. I
Okay,
mean, like nothing. Like, I'll put it this
yeah,
way:
yeah.
I like my YouTube channel, but I don't care if you swear.
Okay. Well, yeah, they've been crapped on, whatever. But like you said, there's no way the hobbits or whatever, they're not going to take over. Rural America is not going to ever rule, right? The city will always rule. It's a centralizing network of resources and other things. What people seem to lament is like a lack of there's two things. There's a lack of community in cities, and increasingly rural areas are becoming more isolated, I guess. But you still find community there, and that's why a lot of people maybe flee there, or maybe people that are sympathetic to the rural idea want to, like, somehow ruralize the entire nation, which just doesn't particularly make sense. It just wouldn't work. And it seems too a lot of our infrastructure is not built directional wise, or how do I describe this? There's not like a flowing of resources. The urbanites do not rely off of rural people anymore, and I mean I think that has to do with global trade. I mean maybe that's closing, we'll see. It kind of seems that way, but it just I think the best way is to have a synthesis where cities maybe have community again, and cities rely off of goods and things produced by rural people, and then there is an industry in between. So then
Yeah, I
everyone's
think you're
happy.
right on that, because there just is a certain part of it where it's like there's a lot of things I wish were true. This kind of like Jeffersonian vision, and like genuinely, like I like that world. I that's a good vision, but it's just not real. And a lot of times, like rural people will point to the denigration of American cities, and American cities are hellholes. And to be honest, Thomas is right when he says a lot of these places they exist for fake reasons. Like places like, Detroit, that was a manufacturing hub. Well, the manufacturing's gone. Why does it exist? That's hard to answer. And I accept that. But there will always be cities. It's just that we know power will coalesce. And again, like we can adjust the balance of that. But yeah, John Carter, what we have isn't real. I completely agree. But we kind of need to go back to what is a normal, like, I guess, like organization for human society. But anyway, Pippi, it was good to talk to you. We have a couple other guys in the
Get him in
the
here.
feed behind you. But is there anything you want to say? Because again, I enjoyed
That's
speaking with you.
kind of generally what I touch on, because it just doesn't seem to be I don't know. It's either just said simply as like, oh well, we're always going to be ruled or whatever kind of thing. But I think there's a better way of saying like there needs to be a way to bridge this gap so that ruralites don't feel like their rulers are hate them. Their rulers should actually rely on them and be happy, for the bricks below, let's say.
Yeah, no, that's well said, and I find myself completely in agreement.
All right.
All right. Well, anyway, man, it was good to talk to you. Let me bring up our next guest. All right. Hey, man, how you doing?
Oh, I'm on? Hello?
Yeah, you're on. How do you say your name, by the way?
Oh, it's Machiavelli. Like, it's actually like Machiavelli, and I'm from Sweden. Maybe you can tell
okay.
from the accent. There is like what they call native tribe or a language actually that's called Kelly, and it's spelled like the start of it spelled like the start of my name.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. So anyway, man, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's winter. I've got the correct levels of black bile. So, yeah, a good level of melancholy, but that's what I like about winter.
I was about to say, that seems like that's kind of required for living that high up on the globe, right? Yeah, so I'm curious, man. How did you end up on the E right, so to speak? Like, what brought you here?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess you kind of forget because it's been so long, and it's not like I document things, but I think I generally started with the anti-feminist guys, of the Gamergate era, I guess, and then I moved on to libertarian. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I went through that stage. I think most of us did. So
yeah, and then in some roundabout way, I end up here.
So I'm curious, right? I'm in contact with a couple guys, from Norway, But what is the scene as far as the right wing in Sweden like? Because everything we hear in the West is all about Malmo and the no-go zones and immigration. Is there a kind of like on the ground opposition to that, or is that very much like outside the mainstream?
Well, I'm not really sure because I think the most of what you see in the politics is not really right wing. It's somehow reactionary against immigration, I guess. But other than that, it's not really right wing in that sense. And I don't really know that we have had so much of a right wing movement in Sweden. There's these. You probably seen like pagan larpers. There's some of that, but other than that, I don't really know if there is much organization. We have like political parties that often get banned and their ballots get thrown out. Not really the Sweden Democrats, but more extreme than that. The ballots get thrown out of the voting. Where you got to vote. So it's not really a big movement.
That's pretty common across continental Europe.
Yeah.
So how much of I guess the because you kind of have this varying degree of acceptability as far as the right wing goes, right? There are countries like in America where generally you can be quite right wing on certain issues and not really suffer any consequences, graded on the scale of the rest of the world. But is it kind of like, is it difficult socially to be like prominently right wing in Sweden, or is that something that's like not a problem?
Well, I think it's kind of impossible in a work environment. Anyways, I would never say that I'm right wing at work. I think there are ways to get around it. I usually say that I'm apolitical or anti-political, and then you can have opinions that go outside the norm in that way.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably pretty similar to my strategy. Is that there are certain words that if you kind of ignore them, you can get away with almost anything you want, as long as you don't say like certain buzzwords that will get you in trouble.
Yeah, and it's also a lot about how you present yourself and kind of how you approach things. The kind of the TED pill things. If you talk to someone about environmental issues, which are really big here in Sweden, you can bring up more so-called based topics like Ted Kaczynski through that, and some people accept it.
Yeah, I've found that that especially, and I guess that Sweden is kind of infamous for its environmental activists, right? But
yeah,
you can kind of easily sell someone on some kind of very based premises, if you just like couch it in the language of environmentalism.
Yeah, sure.
So what are kind of and again, I'm only asking this because I'm very ignorant, on Swedish politics, but what are kind of like the current issues in Sweden? I imagine like geopolitical stuff with Russia is very much in the news, but like what are the real like political divides in Swedish politics?
Well, I think a lot of people kind of realize that it's really fake, the politics, and we have loads of parties, but not really any options. It's all kind of the same, and the parties that are different, the way the system is set up, they have to join a coalition with other parties, so they can bring forth some points that are important to them through these coalitions, but it's not really something that has a big effect. So I think a lot of people are disillusioned because of this. And so you have, of course, leftist parties, and you have so-called right parties that are all liberal, and all of these are kind of the same in how they work out in reality. But the big topics right now, I guess the Russia war is big. I don't think there are many supporters of Russia, at least publicly, but I don't think many. I think it's a very, very small minority that actually wants to be part of NATO in Sweden.
So, and this is, I think I probably read this on Telegram, so I have no idea if this is true or not. But I've heard that essentially this over the last several decades, the Swedish military has dramatically reduced its size, and now they're kind of scrambling to build that back up. Is that true?
Well, I remember in school that I don't know how many were getting drafted, but I think like 1 in 30, I think, were getting drafted, and this was maybe 8 years ago or something like that. So I guess they have been building up for a while. The Swedish military is mostly for defense, but it's also an industry here in Sweden where we export a lot of weapons, like our jet planes.
Right. Because I think it's Aimpoint is Swedish, as is Saab, I believe, who make a lot of weapon systems internationally.
It's called it's Saab, and we have SAS is the planes.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how familiar with, but there's at least in the Midwest here, there's a very large kind of like Swedish diaspora, and my fiance is actually ethnically, of course, it's been 100 years Swedish, and so I've had a lot of Swedish foodstuffs, and some of it's great, like the baked goods are incredible, but I'm incredibly suspicious of what Swedes do with pickled herring and sausage. Both of those,
okay.
I'll give it a shot, but I don't remember what is pickled herring called in Swedish. I can't remember the term for it.
Pickled herring. It's what is it now?
Lutefisk. That's what it is. I don't know how you say it, but it's something like that.
No, I think that's something different.
Well, I tried whatever that was. Yeah. It was difficult.
I never tried that. I don't think people eat that here either. It's
I've eaten it, and it was an adventure, to put it mildly. That was hard to eat.
Well, I feel sorry for you then. It's like we have hurt you in some way.
Well, don't worry. As someone who lives in the American South, I realize that I can't really make fun of other people's food. I come from an area where people have decided that alligator is something that you can regularly eat. So who am I to criticize, right?
Yeah. Well, most of our food is, at least in restaurants, Turkish pizza with where they replace the olive oil with rapeseed oil.
Oof. Yeah. A Turkish man making Italian food with American seed oil. Right. The perfect Swedish dish. But anyway, man, there are a few people behind you. Thank you so much for joining. So is there anything you want to say before we move on to the next guest?
I would like to say thank you for having me. I would like to, I guess I would like to talk more about other topics, but I'm glad I got to represent Sweden in some way.
Yeah, sure thing. And you're in my Telegram group, and if you want to just DM me to set up a longer conversation, I'd be happy to, man, because I'm always interested in speaking to guys from other areas. So yeah, just drop me a line and we'll set something up. Yeah,
that sounds great. I have to organize my thoughts in some way, because when you don't have a YouTube channel or something like that, you kind of just it's like you don't really get it out, and
right, you just think.
Yeah, you have to organize some way.
Yeah. But definitely, man, I'm interested. So be sure to drop me a line. And anyway, it was good talking to you, man.
Yeah, sure. Have a good one.
All right. Ernwolf,
is my mic working?
Yeah, your mic's working
okay,
great.
Does it sound good, actually?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, man. I don't really much to say because I haven't really thought about much today.
Oh, well, fair enough. That's the real joke I play on you guys. I also have no idea what I'm about to say, so I just have a guess.
Just like you, I know a million things, but only an inch deep into it.
Yeah. But anyway, man. So I just so could you kind of like describe yourself? Like what's your what's your perspective? Like what camp of the e-right are you really coming from?
Well, I came. Well, mostly it was because I didn't really have internet until I was like 15, basically.
Based, yes.
So when I got 15, I got a tablet for Christmas that year. A really shitty tablet, and I got YouTube. And then I, through algorithm, I got world class bullshitters or whatever, anti-feminist stuff, because I was already pretty much right wing by that point. Essentially, my coming right wing was like when I was 8 during the election cycle.
Oh, which election?
2008 election cycle.
Okay, so we're about the same age.
First term.
Actually, same thing for me. Yeah.
Mainly because I think it was like after he got elected, so it was the beginning of the second half of the year. And they gave us these really flimsy, like what you call really flimsy like paper. That's like it's about like him getting elected, and then everything else, like the World Cup that year and all that stuff. And I was like, it was just the most straight propaganda I've ever seen. I was like, this is just propaganda. And it was like, and just flipped my switch right then and there.
Yeah, I remember that really well. I also remember the sheer copium that Republicans were smoking that year. They're like,
yeah,
John McCain's got it.
I came down the room to tell my parents that Obama won. They looked at me like I was in the fucking world.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I remember even at the time being like, all right, guys, come on. Like, really, John McCain? That's who you think is going to win?
I didn't know who John McCain was really until years later, and mainly through Razor Fist.
It wasn't even that. It was just pure looking at who seems popular. Like, who do I see signs of? Do I see signs for John McCain? No, but I see lots of Obama signs.
Yeah,
obviously not knowing anything about them.
I mean, I live in Illinois, so I mean, it was even worse because.
Oh, okay then. I've got a question. What the hell is happening with Lori Lightfoot?
Oh well, I'm not that far from Chicago. I live outside the suburbs there, in rural land, but close enough that it's upwards of 20 minutes away. But Lori Lightfoot's basically just. She got put in there because it's the city. She really looks like Beetlejuice. But
no, that's generous.
I mean,
she looks like a troglodyte.
I mean, her eyes are too spaced out. It's the weirdest thing ever. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
Thomas would know more because I'm not really.
She's got 34 chromosomes, like a banana.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the hell happened there. It's the ugliest thing I've ever. She's more ugly than Hillary Clinton.
Oh yeah, well I follow
insane.
her on Twitter, which is genuinely amusing. I should recommend it. But
I genuinely never understood that.
Me either. I don't. That's the thing is it's a different level of interest. It's not like, I wonder what she says. It's more like, is she?
She's like that one chick who the Northman movie, the one that the chick that plays the Slavic girl, the one that has the alcohol feel syndrome.
Yeah.
Whatever her name was.
So it's funny because one of the other things, and again, I don't really follow Chicago politics at all, but she's getting primaried by 2 different Democrats. And
I haven't even seen the ads in a while for that. Actually, I don't really watch TV.
I mean, look, the only reason I know it is because I follow Lori Lightfoot on Twitter because I think it's funny.
Oh, why do you do that? It's insane. What do you do?
Because I'm a glutton for punishment.
I only got Twitter just to do the AA's what would you do stuff.
All right. Well, who's your number one then? We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for content.
My number one, I would have went for Michelle Pfeiffer the whole way, but I'd rather not. I mean, half of those I wouldn't even really went for. But
Douglas Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsmail Dimmadome, tell Saddam not to eat pig slop. All right, let me open up Telegram and tell him stop eating pig slop. I said
the weirdest thing that a lot of people don't know about Illinois is once you get out of Chicago, it's just Indiana. Actually,
it's Ruby
to
Red.
put in perspective, you get past Bloomington, which is center of the state. Southern Illinois is literally Southern Illinois and Southern Indiana are just Kentucky. It's just Kentucky, basically. You get straight up, like my cousin, he's from up here, from where I'm at, up in Northern Illinois. but he moved down to South Central Illinois like about a decade ago, and he's a full Southern accent basically. It's the weirdest thing.
Wild. I always forget that because I've really only been through the Midwest once. I drove from, which was a hell of a drive. I drove from Dearborn to where I live in Virginia, basically in one go.
Oh, so you went for like Ohio, basically.
Yeah, and
I never went that far east. Well, I went
really?
east, but I went to Florida, so I was down Illinois to Kentucky into Tennessee down and through to Florida. That was like 7 years ago.
see,
2015.
I kind of love Tennessee and Kentucky. Like that's
When I was like, so we did a lot of vacations, and when I was like, when I first left the state, truly left the state, it was like the Michigan up the western coast to like on like Silver Lake and that. I was like, I want to live here. Then we go down 2015. They go down to go to Florida for that Christmas for Florida that year, and we get to like Tennessee, and it's like, damn, this is beautiful out here. I would rather live out here. Like right off, like there was these houses that were like log cabins off the side of the hill on the east side outside of Nashville. Like this looks cool out here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I did a long drive to that area of the country, about a year ago.
Yeah,
and it was wild. Like and I'm sure like if you drive enough, you just see weird stuff. You spend enough time on the road. I was driving through rural Kentucky. It was early in the morning. It was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I saw a full, like, massive barn just burning, like completely burning. No one was there. It was just like a roiling hay fire.
What a barn!
Right on the side of the highway, like 4 in the morning. Like it looked like it was the middle of the day when you drove past it. It was wild.
Huh?
But
like, I don't know, but a lot of the barns you'll see on the roads and the kind of roads, a lot are just abandoned. A lot of the family farms don't exist anymore. Like our farm, basically, our farm, both farms actually, my mother's and father's side, both farms are basically stopped farming when I was born. So I'm pretty sure maybe a month after I was born, I was given to my great uncle, and that was like the last harvest that we did ourselves, because he was already dying.
John Carter is right. A lot of these, especially in the South, were old tobacco barns. The one I saw burning was definitely hay, because it was, it looked like a barn for hay, but nonetheless,
I mean, all the barns up here in the Midwest, at least, if they're old barns, a lot of farms didn't really like do full specialized on corn, everyone used corn because that's been the norm since 1850s. But they had like sheep and everything. Like my family, up until like at least the 80s, we had like a whole chicken coop, sheep, cows, dairy, pigs, everything, and an orchard. And none of that exists anymore. I mean, I still find the sheep, the family for the sheep, and what remains of the chicken coop. But
and I'm sure because I was out hunting this year. There is nothing more eerie than an old barn that's all like grown out or grown over and like rotting half apart. And like you look at it during the day and you're like, yeah, whatever. And then you're walking back like out from a tree stand, after dark, and you're like, I don't know, there's a skinwalker in there and it's gonna eat my face.
The weirdest thing is going up like early morning, and you see like the windmills way off in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
The eerie, the simultaneous flashing, because like I hate windmills. So it's like the south of me are all windmills, and they just destroy the landscape. I utterly hate windmills. They just destroy the landscape. It's annoying as hell. The even more eerier thing is going down the roads and just seeing abandoned, rundown farmhouses, and then their barns have collapsed. Basically, like there's this one house that's sat down the road from me since we moved here. It's an old farm, but it's just the house has been collapsed in forever, and no one's ever done anything with the land. So there's a bunch of old like 80s era vans sitting in there. It's rustling away. It's the weirdest, eeriest thing ever.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you spend enough time in the middle of nowhere, you just find stuff that's weird, like really.
Oh yeah,
really
I mean, I've done like deep, and I'll just find a random scrap. Like for instance, the farthest I went was South Dakota, and we were way out there doing prairie hunting, way out like on the Sioux reservation, the Cheyenne reservation out there by way out there, and Pierre's the capital, and we're going like 2 hours from Pierre to where we are where the Siren Mission is, where we're shooting down at, around the Missouri River. And we get to the spot where we finally churn. It's like a 2-hour straight drive. Like every mile you have to break for a deer or something, basically, especially when it's the dusk. It's like a never-ending mule deer out there. It's insane. And we get to this one spot. We turn right, and about like a mile down the road, you just see like 130 acres. It's just a scrapyard. There's just never-ending cars. It's insane. It's like it's middle of nowhere in South Dakota. It's just a scrapyard, all the way back in there. And I've never seen that shit like way out there in deep. I've seen like scrapyards around by me, but we're not like rural, but we're still out there a ways. But here there's no town for an hour anywhere, and just a scrapyard sitting there. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, that is weird, and it's definitely something that I can relate to. I think it's like across the entire rural
Like he had
America.
everything there. Like there was an old like 50s era forklift, like the old ones of the rural, like an actual like, and then like a really old steam shovel that's worn down. It was way back there in the back of it. That's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, we had this farm out where I lived, which had a collection of, I don't know what the actual model was, but we called them Rosa Parks buses because it really was the exact same
Oh,
bus.
yeah,
So that made a picture of Rosa Parks. But it wasn't just one of them. It was like 30 of them all lined up out in the middle of nowhere. And even the farmer wasn't quite sure how they got there, but someone had just left all these old buses just rotting out there. But anyway, man, we've got more people behind you. It was good talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, see you, bud.
All right, talk to you later, man.
Yep.
All right, man. How do you say your name? Because I cannot pronounce that. That is entirely too many consonants.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great, man.
Okay, cool. It's Chrome Tzitzit.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But anyway, man, is there something specifically you wanted to talk about, or you just wanted to hang out for a little bit?
I guess kind of specific. Just a little bit about myself. I'm actually an Orthodox Jew, a chassid, I suppose, Hasidish guy. So that's like why the name tzitzit, like if you know the stuff that we wear with the fringes on it, it's called tzitzit. So my name Chrome Tzitzit.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been like following the right wing for a long time. Like just like finished listening to AAs like UO. I'm like, I don't know. I'm probably like the only Hasidish guy in the sphere, I guess. But maybe there are.
Probably. I mean, I think there's someone else, isn't there? I can't remember. I think we all make
There
fun
might
of Cringewalker for it, but I don't think that's actually true.
Cringewalker is not Hasidish though. Like I can tell from his Twitter. I can tell from his Twitter and everything. He's a secular Jew. I already know like everything about him. Like I think his dad is probably Jewish, but his mom isn't, or something like that. Like, or his mom is Jewish, but his dad is not. I kind of consider them all the same, really. Whatever. Yeah. So I guess like this is my first time actually in the space at all. I followed like Dave Distributors for a long time. He's actually like done a lot for my faith in a weird way. Might come off as strange. Yeah,
Well,
it's weird.
I mean,
but yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I completely agree because I think that what a lot of us have come to realize is that I can't really ever be mad at someone for being kind of strong in their ancestral faith and kind
Yeah.
of being an advocate for their people, you know? And
Yeah.
obviously, like, I mean, generally, like, there's this again, talking about liberal premises, that if you support your own, you must like despise others, and again, it's this weird idea where it's like if you say, I love my mother, everyone's like, oh, why do you hate my mom? Like that would be absurd.
Right.
And again, like I think that, to me at least, like it's part of the reason that I think that like the counter jihad stuff is so cringe.
Right.
Is that there comes a certain part where it's like, really, like are these people our enemies? You know what I mean? They just kind of want to live in their ancestral mode. But anyway, you were saying something before I interrupted you.
No, you didn't interrupt. It's fine. No, it's funny. The counter jihad thing, like AA put me on that, and like after that, I really was like, yeah, like these guys are actually based, and like I sort of wish that we were more like that in a lot of ways. And like when I lived in a much more like insular Hasidic community, it kind of is a little more like that. I moved out of town like 2 years ago, so I'm not like in that milieu anymore, but I do miss it sometimes. But yeah, no, I can't like knock anybody for being a defender of their faith or a defender of their people. Like that's just not my thing. And yeah, a lot of like what the right wing has like really opened my eyes up to in a lot of ways after 2018 and after that stuff was like a lot of double standards, which like obviously those exist. I'm not going to do like the whole hypocrisy thing. Like I get it, it's hierarchy and all that. But it's been interesting to me to like interact with Jews and like in my shul, in my synagogue, and everything like that, and just be like, I don't think these people actually understand their own position. Like they're like it's like a weird thing that I think happens on all sides of like the religious spectrum. Like you get Christians probably the same way, where it's like I don't know. Like it's very interesting to me. So like since I'm Orthodox and everything, I'm not like the typical what you'd consider like the the merchant and all that stuff. In a lot of ways, like very much more similar with a lot of religious people on all sides, like Muslim or Christian or Catholic. Or I actually get along with Catholics the best, to be honest.
Well,
And
there is something to it that I think that the vast majority of people just don't really think that deeply about things.
right,
And so they're kind of on like maintenance mode in the sense that
Mhm.
like they will kind of just go along to get along. And in many cases there's nothing really like wrong with that, you know?
right.
Sorry, I'm just
Well, also
reading
they've never. Oh, I'm not. I don't have access to the chat.
No, that's
I'm just
great.
walking
They're
around.
literally, it's just stupid, but it was
No,
stupid
it's
enough to
okay.
make
I it's totally fine. I expect bring it on. I bring all the smoke. I don't care. I get it. It's fine. But
No, I'm not reading it because I like my YouTube channel, but it made me laugh.
I probably agree with most of it, to be honest. And that's the
But
weird
anyway,
thing
you
about
were
it.
saying.
Yeah, well, that's the weird thing about it is like a lot of people that I interact with, like in my show and my community and all this stuff, like they probably would agree with like 90% of like what people on the farther online right say about Jews. To be honest, it's been a weird journey where like now I'm at this point where it's like I just don't want to be associated with these secular Jews. And I know maybe it's going to be like a no true Scotsman thing, but there is this like, are these people actually Jewish? Like, are they actually doing anything in the vein of like what Judaism prescribes in any way? Like, I have to sit here and listen to Jonathan Greenblatt like wax and wane about like Judy. Like, does this guy even like? Can he even read Hebrew? Like, does he know halacha? Does he keep Shabbos? Does he say Kiddush? Like, does he have any awareness of his own faith or identity? Like, it's like very annoying. Like, and to that end, like I don't expect anybody to actually make those distinctions. Like whenever we get cattled in on the cars again and sent over to the camps again, I don't expect anybody to be like, oh no, these are one of the good ones. Like I don't expect that to happen. Like I get it, it's fine. Like it's gonna happen. It's fine. Like
I should say I completely wait. Can I disavow that?
I don't know. Like I don't really mind either way. Like I'm not like yeah.
Well, and it's interesting you bring up Greenblatt because in many ways I kind of feel like that Kanye West was exactly the gift Jonathan Greenblatt was.
Oh yeah.
Because to be honest,
no, AA's like analysis of that was perfect, honestly. But like
he made Jonathan Greenblatt looked like a moron.
Right.
And to be honest, right, like I don't just because of my geography, right? Like the Jews I interact with are
Sure.
either secularized or Christianized, right? So
Sure.
ethnic at best, and
Right.
they obviously have no relation whatsoever to the ADL or Greenblatt, and it seems like that's pretty common. It seems like he serves a very unique interest.
It's happened more. It's happened more and more. Like whatever. I mean, people in my community we see ADL as like an enemy, honestly. Like they're not actually doing anything for us. But the problem is, and this is our own fault, just like everything is, it's like the actual religious Jewish community doesn't have an ADL because like all of the, well now there is like kind of some starting up online and stuff like, I can't remember their name right now, but like not coalition, but like there's a group of like Torah values or whatever. lot of rabbis, and like they kind of were the ones like when the whole abortion thing was going on. That was another thing that drove me nuts. It was like I have to sit here and listen to like secular Jews talk about how like abortion is a sacred Jewish right. It's like, fuck is this? Like, I'm sorry, I curse quite a lot. I know I'm like,
No, it's fine.
but like, yeah, it's like, what is this? Like, why do I have to associate with these people? Like, why don't we like cut them out? And there's a long history of doing that, but we just haven't really done it in a long time. Yeah, it's like it's infuriating, but it is kind of our fault. Like, there's the Agudas Yisrael. That's like the only other one that is like a pretty big forward-facing Jewish Torah values kind of group, but they don't really get involved unless it's like directly impacting our community politically. They won't make like distinctions on values, or they won't make like speeches about like how we'd like the world. Like, we're just more practical. We're like, we just want this particular political outcome. So if it infringes on us, we're gonna like talk about it. But other than that, we're gonna keep quiet. And what that causes is we have this horrible representation by the people who have the speaker, like the microphone, the people who are actually on Twitter or online and raising money and all this stuff are all secular Jews. And then the Jews who are religious, we're just like, yeah, we're just going to be in the base medrash, like learning Torah and like doing our thing. And like, we're not really going to, it doesn't matter what we say. We don't really care what's going on, like whatever. And so it causes this like big problem where it's, I think, what's that guy? Christian guy, Reverend, I think, Michael E. Jones or something. I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
but
Michael Jones. I don't think he's a professor, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay, fine. But he talks about how like the big Jew like sells out the little Jew kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, like that's exactly what happened. And it always happens. It's like, I don't know, like Hitler didn't hate Jews because they had like payas and like wore a yarmulke, and like he hated them because they were communists. And like those were the ones that he like like that's the one he was exposed to. And then the people who got it on the chin were not really even those commies, because like they could blend or they could leave or they had whatever. Some of them got caught, obviously, but the ones who took it in the chin were really people like me, like people who looked Jewish, because it was like easy to spot. And it's frustrating to me because like I bring this up with people where they're like, I don't know, they can't see past their nose, I guess, on it. They're like, well, you know, whatever, it is what it is, or like things are good for us in America, like this and that. And I'm like, no, but come on, like you need to represent yourselves as like what you actually are, which is not that different from, it's completely different from like the lefty secular Jew stuff, but it's not that different from like the stuff that you'd hear from Michael E. Jones or the stuff that you hear from you know, any BAP or anybody. Well, BAP's like a Hellenist, so probably not him, but like a lot of things that he says also have inspired me in a way. So it's like a very frustrating problem, and it's our fault. Like that's the thing. I don't blame like the guy in for it. It's like, yeah, it's our fault. We don't do enough to talk about it, and like we just let it go, and that's how we're like in this mess.
Well, and I think too that especially in the U.S. is that Mr. Patriarch, of course, pointing out the pun, but if and again, obviously we could have another conversation about why this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it was almost like
I have all the time in the world.
There could have been a peaceful resolution of this. You know what I mean?
What specifically? Sorry, I just want to pause there.
Resolution to what? Of at least in America, right? Of relations between, you know, like Christians and Jews. You know, it could have been fine if essentially like, and again, like obviously this didn't happen. But essentially, if we could have just reached a place of being like, all right, like you have your religious communities, we have ours. Like in America, especially, there have always been Jewish communities.
I think, but Jay, I actually think that happened. I actually do think that did happen. Like the problem is that now, well, okay, so red pill me on this. Like, what do you mean by that then? Because I'm kind of like, that is kind of how America was. Like, I mean, the Jews who lived in Manhattan and New York and stuff, the Jews who live in Borough Park, Williamsburg, like those places. Nobody really infringes on their stuff until more recently. Now it's like they're cracking down on the schools and all this stuff, but
no, and I agree with that. Like it seems like especially in New York that the like what is kind of called in popular media like the ultra orthodox communities are kind of seen as an enemy group. But
yes,
there was this kind of concerted move in especially like Ivy League institutions and in like different like branches of government. Like for instance, like the Supreme Court is a good example, to essentially kind of like edge out like legacy Americans, you know. And I think that whereas if those people had been like, all right, like, hey, you know, like welcome in, you know what, like just, you know, you're here. Because if you look at especially like the Southern Jewish communities, which I believe have a different ethnic origin, I'm not 100% on that. But
do
they're actually
do you mean like Southern America, or do you mean like
no, Southern America,
like
right? So like New
like
Orleans is one of the oldest.
okay, you mean United States? Sorry, because like we're like, you're not talking about like Argentinians or whatever,
or like Ethiopians. No.
Okay.
No, I mean, and so to again, and this is hard because
you can say whatever you want, man. I'm not gonna like get offended, but you have to watch Susan.
I can't
whatever.
Yeah, Sephardic. Thank you, Windhoek, I believe.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if Sephardic is the right term for that.
Sephardic is from Spain, so it's like a certain thing. But you're talking about like New Orleans and Texas and that stuff. That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
So go ahead.
But essentially that there was kind of a transfer of elite. You know, and that doesn't mean obviously all elites, but essentially that the WASPs got displaced. They got by a alliance between essentially
of the Irish and the Italians and
the Ellis Islanders and you know, God's chosen, so to speak. And again, there's a certain part where it's like, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Exactly.
You know, where it's like, to be honest, like you say you're a Nietzschean, but you get mad when you lose. You know,
right.
But nonetheless, it's kind of like, well, you can't play that game and expect there to be no hard feelings at the end of the day.
Of course. Absolutely.
And again, I think, and this is, okay, I'm kind of, because again, personally, this is not something I have a lot of like emotion in, but I'm trying to speak generally here, where it's like, again, I think that there was a potential for that conflict never to happen.
Right.
But nonetheless, it did. And I don't really know if there's a nice way to paper that over, at least in like the current climate, you know? And I think that, again, much like the urban rural divide,
I think you're being overly optimistic.
Okay. Tell me more.
No. So I actually think like that it actually is quite easy to paper over, but that's just because people are really sheep and they're really weak and they don't really like, as much as like I agree with everything in the right wing and stuff, and I have only a few qualms with it, like the majority of people don't actually care about AA or you or distributists or any of the, or me or any of us, right? Like they just don't care. And they won't even like budge on it. Like I have, you know, plenty of people in my life that like I try to talk to them about how, you know, suffrage was a mistake, and they look at me like I'm a fucking like lunatic. And I expect that, obviously, but like I think that if they just had enough little concessions, they wouldn't even care. Like they wouldn't notice it at all. It wouldn't matter. Like you would just have to do a few little legal changes in the Supreme Court level, and people would just move on with their lives. So,
Well,
I don't know if you're talking about something more specific.
No, not at all. And that's an interesting perspective. But it is, I will be perfectly honest, it is incredibly late here. It's past midnight.
So no. Well, I'm also. Oh, what a shame! I should have hopped in.
Oh yeah, no worries, man. But if you want to talk again, like I said, you're in my Telegram, so feel free to reach out. And I guess I'll bring on Luthemplar again to close this out, because I did kick him for being a filthy flop apologist. But I'll probably be winding this down soon. But it was good to talk.
Well, no, I would love to get more into it, because I think that like there is a lot to say, like as far as, and just to close out my little section here, like a lot of the things that are in the right wing are like, you know, hierarchy and like you know, tradition and all this stuff, like these are Jewish things. They're not uniquely Jewish things, but they are like in the actual practice of Judaism. Like the stuff is very basic. Like there's the rabbi and there's the Gabayim, like the people who help him, and then there's the followers, and he makes the decisions and everybody listens to it. Like these things are like very basic and ingrained, and it's just interesting because like all of the flack that gets thrown at Jews, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm like, it just is what it is. Like a lot of it's just coming from people who have no meaningful connection to Judaism at all. And it's such a shame that it's like that that's the case. But it's our own problem. Again, like it's our fault, so we have to fix it. So yeah,
Well, great, and it was good to talk to you, man. I'll be sure to catch up with you later.
absolutely. Bye.
All right, Cringe Walker, you're back.
Oy vey. No, I'm not a secular. I am not a secular Jew. I there is a Jewish woman on my mother's side. So what? Legally speaking, I would maybe be, but I was raised Catholic. The woman converted to the beautiful religion of Eastern Catholicism, which most people in the West don't know. And then sorry, I'm currently playing a game, so I'm just trying to mute it.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
But no, I've sorry if you hear the retards in here talking in the background.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Where's my
Well, while you're going with that, I've got some super chats.
Okay, go ahead.
Lumpy SJ for $10 said, "Hey Jay, wanted to ask what you think of the infighting on the online right. Fuentes got back on Twitter, which started sniping between the Baptists and the Groypers. Get tired of bickering between right wingers." I actually completely agree, and I don't want to be. I try not to be bitchy or like talk about other people. Again, I think it's just like bad form. But I do not prefer the Groypers in general. I think they're kind of annoying. I think that it taps into kind of like a teenagery energy that was useful at a time, but at this point it's just like it. Like, okay, fair enough. It was funny what you did to Charlie Kirk, but now you're just being a retard and saying, "Look, haha, I made everyone laugh because I was a retard." It's like, sure, you were the joke. And to be honest, like I think Bap is interesting. I have pretty fundamental disagreements with him. So it's kind of like that Simpsons meme, of all the guys with money with the two monkeys fighting. It's like it's just not my problem. But I do think it's immature. And to me, I think that the fight between Bap and Fuentes is very much one direction. Like Bap kind of keeps to himself. He doesn't really start stuff, really. Like people go after him. And again, like I say this is I'm not one of his acolytes. I don't listen to his podcast. I think he's an interesting guy, but I'm not a huge fan of his, but he doesn't start this, and I think you can tell who's serious by who starts shit like this that doesn't matter, and if someone is continually doing it over and over and over again, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, like you're playing into his game, you're giving him what he wants. And Paul Moosefoot, right? Like I think he sees creators as competitors rather than compatriots. I completely agree. And I'm sure you guys have noticed I shill my friends consistently, like all the time, because like I kind of view this as like we're all in this together. None of us are getting rich from it,
Unfortunately.
I know. Tell me about it. And so like we're all pushing in the same direction. You know what? Like maybe when we get to Based World, we can have these like niche autistic arguments, but at least from my perspective, like I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this because I'm serious about it. And so like I'm not starting like knife fights. And even like, like Nick, like I don't have any personal problem with him. I don't really watch his stuff. He rubs me the wrong way, but like if you guys get something out of him, like fair enough. Like get something out of him. He's just not my cup of tea, so to speak. What are you playing, Cringe Walker, by the way? I'm curious.
I'm playing Pavlov. It's a great stress reliever. It's the VR game that's basically Counter-Strike, and I kind of like
okay,
it.
Yeah,
I really like it, but it's like I probably shouldn't like it. I'm almost 32 years old. I definitely should not be playing video games.
Yeah, I am. I don't game a lot. I I tend to have. I will not play games for months, and then something will like grab me by the prefrontal cortex and just like monopolize my life. Like to me, like top-down CRPGs are like crack to me. Where it's just like something like Baldur's Gate or something. Like I just I can't, I won't let myself buy them.
Yeah,
I know that I'll never come back out.
For me, that's one of the original XComs. I think it's the original. I forget which one, but it's like top down and it's really really nice because it's like you develop a certain like connection to all the various characters, and you're just kind of like oh, I don't want this guy to die, and then you lose him, and you're like it's an emotional hit.
But and I have a feeling because those game, I think it was the relaunch of that series came out when I was in high school, and my friends would always just make like our entire squads just like caricatures of people we knew, you know? And so it'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, you died. Like, you moron.
Oh yeah,
You-
that's what AA does with XCOM and other games. He makes them off of all of his like co-hosts all the time, which I kind of love. I love that. I love it. One day, hopefully, I'll be honored. But I've bought AA games on Steam, and he's done like playthroughs of them occasionally. I'm like, oh, I hope one day I'll be a character in those stupid game streams. But yeah, what was I gonna say? I off topic, but I started watching Space Force again, and I'm convinced this is like people from the Trump administration letting off steam in the form of entertainment, because the character, you know, have you ever watched that series?
No, I haven't.
They have a mock Nancy Pelosi and a mock AOC who are clearly those characters, but not by name. And it's absolutely hilarious because like Nancy Pelosi is this like haggard old bitch who just wants to like fuck with everything, and AOC is just retarded. And like they kind of balance each other out in terms of extremes. Like Nancy knows things but is like a bitch about it, and then AOC is completely a retard but like has the passion. I'm like, this is but that's like the Democrat side. Within the actual Space Force itself, there's this guy called I forget his name. He's like a general. He's like this orange-haired general called Grabby or something. Clearly a Trump reference, and he's like always like the guy fucking with Space Force and like you know, fucking with law, fucking with everything. It's like, this is clearly Trump. And then the guy actually running Space Force is this like conservative, solid guy who's very clearly Mike Pence. And then all the different characters kind of look like this. You know, remember Scaramucci from the Trump admin?
Oh, that was my favorite Trump like sideshow character.
There is a guy called Scary Minchie instead of Scary Moochie, and who's very clearly a reference to that guy, who's like addicted to social media and just like terrible. And like the more I watch the show, like this is just people from the Trump administration venting their frustrations.
Yeah, that's funny. I've always been like highly averse to like quote unquote political TV shows like The West Wing or something like that. It drives me crazy.
Oh yeah, well yeah, because it's like kind of biased and clearly mean. This is more like it's more like it's actually kind of surprisingly respectful to the conservatives. Like, you know, they're still fools. They're still making a mockery of it, but it's like I can take the criticism. It's not demeaning. Who's the guy from The Office who's in that show?
Michael. Oh, not his. I know no actors, as evidenced by my inability to catch a Goodfellas reference earlier.
You know the character I'm talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
right?
that guy. The guy.
That
if you
guy
will.
from he's like the boss in The Office. He's the one playing the boss of the Space Force, who like very clearly is a reference to Mike Pence. And he's actually a respectable guy. Like it is the first episode of season 2. He's like on trial for all the shit that went wrong with the Space Force, in the same way that Mike Pence has to like answer for, you know, January 6th and stuff. And in the end, he gets out of being in trouble because like everybody in the staff loved him. He was very loyal and kind to them. Like it's like kind of this like mock trial, or I guess you could call it whatever the president went through. I can't remember the name.
Steve Carell, that's the actor. As like
Yeah,
three different
there
people
we
said.
go. But yeah, I like anyway, tangent, and I'm like half tired, but like I would love like people to review that from the perspective that's like talking about what happened in the Trump administration, because in the season 2 it's like it takes place right after the election, and again it's a Space Force. It's not like supposed to be political, but they like kind of like are joking about all the good and bad that happened during the Trump administration. And the trial against the Space Force is basically being run by the quote-unquote new administration that's like far more serious and takes everything like far more important. But like they're also shown to be kind of like dicks, like the Biden administration is.
Yeah, I'm really like consistently like, I guess, fascinated by the idea that like the adults are back in charge.
Yeah, fuck that.
Well, because like it's weird that there really is this like Janice like two-faced nature to the regime. You know, there's like the old like horrible corporate lizard people, of like the John Bolton types, who are really like in the blue yellow war. And then there's also just this like squad of terminally online millennials, and there's no one in between.
Yeah, people they forget that every political party has factions, and like you literally saw Trump take over a political party. What do you think the Democrats aren't the same way?
Sorry, I know me yawning into the mic is great podcasting.
Yeah.
All right, I am reaching the end of my rope, but thank you for coming on, Cringe Walker, multiple times as kind of the ringer here.
Yeah,
But
well,
anyway, guys-
I had to defend my honor that I was. In fact, not only am I not Jewish, I don't know Yiddish, I don't know Hebrew to save my life. I know more Greek than Hebrew. My grandma and mother spoke it, but I was raised Catholic, and it's been that way in my family for many years now. So I'm sorry, but I can't be your closet Jew of the alt-right.
Well, that is disappointing. That was really what I had you penciled in for on our.
I love the jokes.
Genghis,
Don't get me wrong. Don't get. And everyone who's seen my face knows that if there's any side of my muddy family that I got the genes for, I definitely got the rabbi genes because I look like it. But I'm not that. All right, that's enough.
Well, anyway, guys, if you want to send some last super chats to round this up, we can. But if not, I'm probably going to bring this to a close because woo boy, it is it's getting late and I'm running out of steam here.
Oh yeah, me too. I got work in the morning and I'm still up. I'm gonna play video games.
Yeah,
for
I
hours
don't. That's the
man.
advantage of being unemployed.
Oh yeah. Fun. You got that neat life going. What do they call it?
Yeah, the neat lifestyle. Well, here's the thing: is that I'm getting hired on by a finance company, but it just takes forever. Like it takes forever. There's so many like little things and like certifications, and of course they don't pay you through all that. So I'm just like sitting there podcasting 4 times a week or whatever.
Take advantage of it. Like you got so much time to like interview random ass people. I think I give
mean,
like a long.
What do you think I'm doing, man? I'm podcasting.
I know.
I've got 7 interviews this week.
With people, not for work, right?
Yeah, not for work. Are you kidding? I'm not that valuable.
I hope you get a chance because, like, you were talking about architecture earlier, and like I did a 2-year-long podcast with Pharos and Oline, who is now back in school, so he kind of disappeared from the world. But yeah, I mean, Pharos is really fun to have on because he's just like such a brilliant guy, and he's like in like the degenerate ad media world. So he can
I need to have him on. You're not the first person to recommend that I reach out to him, but I know who he is, but I have no like common field of contact. Is he on Twitter?
He's on Twitter. He'll answer it. I recommend he reach out to you too, but he's pretty busy because he's just had a kid, so he's like
right. He has a real life, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely reach out to him. Anyway, kick me out because I'm in a video game. But
also, Cringe Walker, I don't know if you know this. I can edit your name, so I've been changing your name to the most horrifying stuff this entire time.
I have not been paying attention to it. What is it now?
It's Uwu Quinge Walker.
Oh no, that's not the first person.
All right. Anyway, I'm done with him. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming out. This was a fun stream. I enjoy these community streams. They're really fun, and I enjoy getting to know you guys. I also enjoy kicking Cringe Walker. That's a joke that never gets old. All right. But anyway, guys, I have an episode tomorrow night with George Bagby. It should be a good one. It should be more formalized than normal. We're going to be talking about the Second Great Awakening. So the origin of the Shakers, the Oneida cult and Mormons, kind of a lot of these like American, snake handlers and cults and things like that. And then on Friday, I've actually got a choice. I will be interviewing, or on Thursday rather, I'll be interviewing all in one day, Chris Gard and Thomas and I think actually John D. He's the one who'll be on the main slot. So come out for that one. It should be a good one. I'm going to talk to him about, Puritanism and kind of like the importance of, I guess, like enjoying things and like having a sense of Epicureanism on the right and kind of, kind of like, I guess, cultivating an aristocratic personality. But anyway, guys, thanks for coming out. This was really fun. I enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys later. Good night.